Chapter 605. Duan Lingtian wanted to restrain her, yet it was already too late. This little girl, Xuanai, had always been outspoken and unforgiving. Little girl, be careful that trouble comes from a loose tongue. The green-clothed old man's face sank slightly as he suddenly looked at Han Xuanai, and killing intent flashed within his muddy eyes. Trouble comes from a loose tongue. Old bastard, I. How could Han Xuanai endure it when she heard the old man's threat, and she instantly exploded with rage. Xuanai. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand to grab Han Xuanai's hand, and he lightly shook his head to her as he said via voice transmission at the same time. There's no need to lower yourself to his level. Moreover, this old fellow's strength isn't bad. We'll just seize whatever treasure he finds after he enters the Sword Monarch's treasure. Killing him now isn't worth it. Duan Lingtian's words caused Han Xuanai's expression to ease up, and she grunted. Old bastard, this young miss won't fuss about it with you out of consideration for big brother Lingtian. At the same time, traces of an excited sheen were mixed within Han Xuanai's eyes, and she said via voice transmission to Duan Lingtian, Big brother Lingtian, you're right. We'll seize the treasure from this old bastard after he finds it, and we'll kill him after angering him to the point of spitting blood. Han Xuanai's voice transmission caused Duan Lingtian to feel a chill run down his spine, and he couldn't help but observe a moment of silence for the green-clothed old man. This old fellow could offend anyone, yet he dared to offend this little she-devil. You! The old man was angered to the point his face went grim and his body trembled when he was reprimanded by a young girl at the age of 15 or 16. When he saw the old man about to flare up, the nearby Dongming hurriedly restrained him. Elder Hu, since this young miss has already taken a step back, then why continue fuss about it with her? Forget it. Humph. Elder Hu grunted coldly, and he listened to Dongming in the end and didn't flare up again. Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at the old man. The old man's cultivation was unable to conceal itself before his spiritual force. This old man was in existence at the 8th level of the Void Initiation stage. In terms of strength, it was the same as the Grand Elder of the Tang family who was frozen by Han Xuanai and killed by Duan Lingtian 2 days ago. At this moment, the valley regained its peace. The two middle-aged men in embroidered clothes standing at the side were now sizing up Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai from head to toe. Their eyes revealed a strange luster that was difficult to distinguish. No one knew what he was thinking. Whoosh! 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 One figure after another descended from the top of the valley. Not long after, the remaining 5 groups of people arrived as scheduled. These people were all in groups of 2 or 2. Now, when the other 5 groups of people appeared, they couldn't help but be stunned when they saw the combination of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. They are also Jade Sword owners. For a moment, many people couldn't help but be curious. Youngsters, do you really have jade swords in your hands? In next to no time, someone looked at Duan Lingtian and asked with a doubtful expression. Duan Lingtian didn't say anything, and with a raise of his hand, he withdrew the jade sword that belonged to him from his spatial ring before waving it before the person that doubted him. Instantly, that person was speechless. Young man, if I was you, I'd look for a senior to go with you to the Sword Monarch's treasure. You're truly too rash. A green-clothed old man that was comparatively kinder shook his head and sighed. The dangers of the Sword Monarch's treasure was something no one could predict. It was precisely because of this that no one dared underestimate the dangers within the Sword Monarch's treasure. The unknown was undoubtedly the most terrifying. Under these circumstances, the stronger one's strength was, the higher the chances one had of surviving and obtaining a fortuitous encounter of one's own. Thank you for the reminder, senior. Duan Lingtian smiled gratefully towards the green-clothed old man's reminder. But I know what I'm doing, so there's no need for senior to worry. Has the others brought jade swords? Meanwhile, another person withdrew a jade sword and asked the others. For a time, the other 7 groups of people each withdrew a jade sword and displayed it before the eyes of everyone. 9 jade swords were gathered together. Right at this moment. Duan Lingtian noticed that the jade sword in his hand had suddenly started trembling, and it seemed as if it had received the call of something, and it urgently wanted to leave his hand. On the other hand, the jade swords in the hands of the other 8 people were more or less the same. The 9 jade swords were trembling now, and every single jade sword pointed towards the same direction. Precisely speaking, it was at the same point. According to legend, once the 9 swords combine into one, they'll be able to transform into a completely new jade sword that leads us to the Sword Monarch's treasure. Meanwhile, Dongming, who held a jade sword, spoke out. Everyone, how about we combine the 9 swords now and look for the Sword Monarch's treasure together? As soon as he finished speaking, Dongming glanced at the surroundings. I have no objections. Duan Lingtian shrugged with an indifferent expression. I have no objections as well. I have no objections. For a time, besides Dongming who'd made this suggestion, another 5 people that held jade swords shook their heads. Including Duan Lingtian and Dongming, a total of 7 people agreed to directly combine the 9 swords and search for the Sword Monarch's treasure. Only the other 2 people that held jade swords hadn't made a stand. One of them was one of the 2 middle-aged men that had arrived at the gorge since long ago. The other person was an emaciated old man with a short figure and a pair of cross-eyed eyes. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian noticed that the middle-aged man and emaciated old man had suddenly glanced at each other before nodding at the same time. They seemed to have come to some sort of agreement. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian noticed. The 2 middle-aged men, the emaciated old man, and the gray-clothed old woman by the emaciated old man's side looked at him at the same time. Precisely speaking, they were looking at him and Han Xuanai who was by his side. What do all of you want to do? Dong Ming's expression went slightly grim. Nothing. I just feel that some people don't have the qualifications to hold jade swords. Why don't you hand over the jade swords and give up 2 spots? The middle-aged man that held the jade sword shook his head as he looked at Duan Lingtian. It was as if he was narrating something that wasn't important. Exactly. The emaciated old man that similarly held a jade sword nodded in agreement. I have a friend in the Eastern Mulberry Empire's imperial city. I originally didn't intend to bring him along. But since there are 2 spots left now, I intend to call him along. He's in existence at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage, and if he enters the Sword Monarch's treasure with us, it'll be extremely helpful to us. The emaciated old man's words caused many people that had grim expressions earlier to heave a sigh of relief. Yeah. They didn't know what dangers were within the Sword Monarch's treasure. But they could be sure of one thing. The stronger one's strength was, the higher one's chances of survival would be. For a time, the gazes of most people descended onto Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. Perhaps, in their eyes, even if a violet-clothed young man around the age of 25 and a yellow-clothed young woman around the age of 15 or 16 entered the Sword Monarch's treasure, they would be of no help to them and would only drag them down. But even though the others felt like this, they didn't speak out and only watched coldly from the sidelines as the situation developed. Dong Ming was included amongst these people. After a short moment, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai were surrounded by the middle-aged man, emaciated old man, and gray-clothed old woman in 4 corners. 4 gazes stared fiercely at the jade sword in Duan Lingtian's hand. Kid, if you hand over the jade sword now and leave right away, we can spare your life. Exactly. So long as you hand over the jade sword and give up those 2 spots, there's no enmity between us, so there's no need for us to make a move against you. Kid, put down the jade sword and fuck off if you're sensible. The 4 of them looked at Duan Lingtian, and their words were filled with threats. The atmosphere within the gorge was ready to fight. Of course, there were another 5 groups of people that were watching the show. Brother Lingtian. Dong Ming who stood nearby frowned, and he was unable to continue watching in the end, so he took a step forward with the intention of rescuing Duan Lingtian. Dong Ming. Meanwhile, the green-clothed old man by Dong Ming's side stopped Dong Ming. "Don't get involved in this mess. Otherwise, I won't forgive you." Dong Ming's figure stiffened as he glanced at Duan Lingtian with guilt, and then he sighed before withdrawing his footsteps in the end. This scene was clearly noticed by Duan Lingtian. At the same time that warmth arose in his heart, he couldn't help but be slightly enraged. Of course, his rage was directed towards the green-clothed old man. "Brother Lingtian, give the jade sword to them. No matter what's within the sword monarch's treasure, it's all fake. Only your own life is real, and it's the most important." Dong Ming's voice transmission sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears. Dong Ming wanted to persuade Duan Lingtian to give up the jade sword and leave. Duan Lingtian naturally knew that Dong Ming had good intentions. "No matter what, amongst all the people present, only you have the intention to help me and persuade me. I, Duan Lingtian, will remember this favor." Duan Lingtian nodded to Dong Ming, and then he sent a voice transmission before changing the topic. "But, not just anyone has the ability to seize the jade sword in my hand." Dong Ming was stunned. It was difficult for him to imagine where exactly this young man's confidence came from. No matter how strong the natural talent of a young man that looked to be around the age of 25 was, at most, a martial artist that had just entered the void initiation stage. As for the other young girl that was around the age of 15 or 16, her ability to fly had already shocked him. As far as he was concerned, the young girl was at most a genius martial artist that had just broken through to the void prying stage. Even though the old man was dead, he didn't leave behind even a trace of blood. This strange scene caused the crowd to gasp when they finally came back to their senses. Old man, the old woman was stunned, completely stunned. "She killed her husband. I'll kill you." Under his extreme rage, the old woman lost all reason and pounced towards Han Xuanai without regard for her life. The outcome was obvious. The old woman had transformed into an ice sculpture as well, and she stood there with a strange posture. "Humph." Along with Han Xuanai grunting coldly, she lightly raised her hand to descend onto the ice sculpture, and she instantly shattered the ice sculpture of the old woman into countless pieces. The old woman had followed in the footsteps of her husband. What a terrifying ice concept. Dong Ming's pupils constricted as his heartbeat sped up. Now, he finally understood why Duan Lingtian would be so confident. So it turned out that there was such an expert by Duan Lingtian's side. Killing two 7th level void initiation stage martial artists was simply as simple as killing chickens or cutting grass. If he didn't see it with his own 2 eyes, he would find it difficult to believe. A young woman that looked to be at most 15 or 16 years old actually possessed such a terrifying cultivation. Most importantly, the young woman had attacked twice, yet from the beginning until the end, the energy of the heaven and earth hadn't completely condensed into an ancient horned dragon silhouette when she'd already stopped. It caused others to be unable to see through her exact cultivation. Demon. In the next moment, a thought suddenly appeared in Dong Ming's mind. After this thought arose, it was impossible to get rid of. Void transformation stage demon beasts were capable of taking human form, and they were called demons. This was something that was common knowledge. Most importantly, after void transformation stage demon beasts took human form, they had a chance to shape their outer appearance on their own. According to rumor, some demons with strange tempers like to transform themselves into the appearance of human children. In the foreign lands, it was very likely that a human child that looked to be 7 or 8 years old was a void transformation stage demon, and their strength was extremely terrifying. It wasn't only Dong Ming, there were many others that had similar thoughts. The body of Elder Hu that stood by Dong Ming's side started trembling imperceptibly. He couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in his heart when he thought of the conflict he'd had with this young woman earlier. If he really dared make a move at that time, then the consequences were obvious. The young woman killed 7th level void initiation stage martial artists like cutting grass or killing chickens. He didn't think that he was much stronger than a 7th level void initiation stage martial artist. Along with the gazes of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai moving over, it descended onto the two middle-aged men in embroidered clothes that surrounded them. The gazes of the others descended onto the two of them in unison. At this moment, their gazes were filled with pity. You two are the people that completely slaughtered all the higher-ups of the Tang clan, including the Tang clan's patriarch and grand elder 2 days ago? The young man in embroidered clothes that held the jade sword had recalled the incident that gave rise to much discussion in the Eastern Mulberry Empire's imperial city 2 days ago when Han Xuanai made a move. Now, he had no choice but to link that incident with the yellow-clothed young woman before him. Only because their methods were too similar. I remember now. One of the spectating old men couldn't help but exclaim in shock. I heard that a terrifying young woman that had comprehended ice concept made a move 2 days ago to transform all the higher-ups of the Tang clan into ice sculptures and killed them. So it was her. I've heard of that incident as well. Supposedly, that young woman killed 8th level void initiation stage martial artists with a raise of her hand. Looks like someone is going to suffer misfortune. The spectating people whispered in discussion. They didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy towards the two middle-aged men that went ghastly pale and shivered. At the bottom of it all, this incident was brought about by the two middle-aged men, and they couldn't blame anyone else. One had to pay for what they did. I'll give you the jade sword, I'll give you the jade sword. Don't kill me, don't kill me. At this moment, the middle-aged man that held the jade sword had taken the jade sword to be a hot potato, and he hurriedly threw it at Han Xuanai's feet as he spoke in panic. I'll give you the jade sword, we'll give up the chance to enter the sword monarch's treasure. We'll leave right now, we'll leave right now. The other middle-aged man in embroidered clothes glanced at Han Xuanai with fear, and when he noticed that Han Xuanai was expressionless, he took a deep breath before the origin energy beneath his feet skyrocketed, and he shot into the sky. The middle-aged man in embroidered clothes in front instantly followed up when he saw his companion about to leave. Big brother Ling Tian gave all of you a chance, but all of you didn't cherish it properly. Han Xuanai spoke slowly with a voice that was pleasant to the ear like an oriole, yet when it entered into the ears of everyone present, it was no different than the voice of a devil. Whoosh! Along with Han Xuanai raising her hand, strong winds that were icy cold to the extreme appeared once more and charged into the sky. Instantly, the bodies of the two middle-aged men that had just soared into the sky froze before transforming into two ice sculptures that floated in midair, and they slowly glowed under the rays of the scorching sun. On the other hand, the origin energy on their bodies was ceaselessly suppressed. After a short moment, their origin energy was completely exhausted. The two ice sculptures lost the support of their origin energy and crashed to the ground, shattering into two piles of shattered ice. The gorge was deathly silent once more. Besides Duan Lingtian, the gazes of everyone that looked at Han Xuanai were filled with terror, terror that came from the soul. The ability of this young woman had completely shocked them. If she's a human, she's at least a void interpretation stage expert. Or perhaps, she's a demon that has stepped into the void transformation stage. This was the unanimous thought in the hearts of everyone present. Duan Lingtian took 2 steps forward and searched for a while at the place where the ice sculpture of the emaciated old man shattered, and then he found the jade sword that belonged to the old man. The jade sword was completely intact. Duan Lingtian wasn't surprised by this. No matter what, this jade sword was the key to the sword monarch's treasure, and it was something left behind by the martial monarch. Unless it was an expert at the martial monarch stage or above, it would probably be as difficult as ascending the heavens for an ordinary martial artist to destroy it. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian picked up the jade sword that was by Han Xuanai's feet. For a time, there were 3 jade swords in Duan Lingtian's hand. Everyone, please withdraw your jade swords and allow the 9 swords to combine into one to lead us to the sword monarch's treasure. Duan Lingtian's gaze swept past the remaining 6 groups of people. These people were all people that agreed to combine the 9 swords earlier. Earlier, they didn't refuse allowing the 9 swords to combine into one. Now that they'd witnessed Han Xuanai's extremely terrifying strength, they didn't dare dally and released the jade swords in their hands. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian released the 3 jade swords in his hand as well. Instantly, the 9 jade swords charged into the sky and collided together. A strong light flashed, and it caused everyone to be unable to refrain from instinctively narrowing their eyes. When everyone including Duan Lingtian opened their eyes once more, a completely new jade sword had appeared before their eyes. This was a jade sword that flickered with jade-green flowing lights, and it emitted waves of fierce aura. Swish! The jade sword trembled, and transformed into a streak of green light. Then, it flew straight towards the south. Instantly, numerous figures transformed into flowing lights that chased after it. Let's go as well. Many people looked at Duan Lingtian's group of 3 that sat upright on the back of the 3-eyed flame tiger, and their eyes were filled with envy, and they wished for nothing more than to be able to ascend and allow the 3-eyed flame tiger to give them a ride. But they didn't have the guts. Who knew if they did this, the yellow-clothed young woman would freeze them into ice sculptures as well. When they recalled the 4 people that had died at the hands of the young woman 3 days ago, they still had a lingering fear in their hearts. Who? Duan Lingtian, who sat on the back of the 3-eyed flame tiger, awoke from his cultivation, and his gaze flickered. My cultivation has finally approached the bottleneck before the 2nd level of the void initiation stage. It's time to consume the spirit void fruit. As Duan Lingtian muttered to himself, a crystalline and translucent spirit fruit appeared in his hand. A dense fragrance spread out. Spirit void fruit. Han Xuanai looked at the spirit fruit at the first possible moment, and although she was slightly surprised, she didn't take it seriously. The spirit void fruit was of no use to her now. But, Han Xuanai not taking the spirit void fruit seriously didn't mean that the others didn't take it seriously as well. At this moment, everyone including Dong Ming stared at the spirit void fruit in Duan Lingtian's hand with burning gazes. If it wasn't for them being afraid of the young woman's terrifying strength, they'd probably have swarmed over long ago and seized the spirit void fruit in Duan Lingtian's hand. The spirit void fruit was a spirit fruit used exclusively by void initiation stage martial artists. Even if it was a 9th level void initiation stage martial artist that consumed it, it would still be extremely helpful. Besides Han Xuanai, all the people present were void initiation stage martial artists, and all of them had covetous eyes when they saw the spirit void fruit in Duan Lingtian's hand. Squeak squeak, hiss hiss, presently, even little gold, little black, and little white that were hidden under the sleeves of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai were slightly restless. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian stuffed the spirit void fruit in his hand into his mouth and swallowed it in a few mouthfuls. A warm flow followed along his throat and flowed into his body. He was able to clearly sense the vast medicinal strength contained within the warm flow. This spirit void fruit was precisely obtained from the Dark Han Dynasty's Milky Way City's treasure-gathering pavilion's master, Xiang Ying, and he didn't consume it earlier because he was waiting for an opportunity. Although the medicinal strength of the spirit void fruit couldn't be considered to be top amongst the spirit fruits used by void initiation stage martial artists. But to a first-level void initiation stage martial artist, it was undoubtedly extremely strong. After he broke through to the void initiation stage, Duan Lingtian had a plan. Once his cultivation at the first level of the void initiation stage stabilized and advanced a step further, he would consume the spirit void fruit and strive to break through 2 levels in one go in a short period of time. Directly step into the 3rd level of the void initiation stage. If it wasn't for this, Duan Lingtian would have consumed the spirit void fruit when he'd just broken through to the 1st level of the void initiation stage that day. As the saying goes, good steel should be used on the blade, and Duan Lingtian was precisely waiting for this moment. After consuming the spirit void fruit, Duan Lingtian closed his eyes and started to meditate and cultivate. As for chasing after the jade sword and heading to the sword monarch's treasure, there was utterly no need for him to worry with the three-eyed flame tiger as his mount. What he could do now was cultivate seriously and see if he had the time to smoothly break through to the third level of the void initiation stage before entering the sword monarch's treasure. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Earth Dragon Form. Unknowingly, Duan Lingtian's entire body and mind were immersed in cultivation. Time silently flowed by. The jade sword that led the way ahead was like a machine that didn't know exhaustion, and it flew day after day. A month of time passed in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian, who sat cross-legged on the back of the three-eyed flame tiger, finally moved. Duan Lingtian, who'd cultivated for an entire month, opened his eyes that were like dazzling stars, and at the same time, he spat out a mouthful of foul air. Finally, a brilliant smile bloomed on Duan Lingtian's face. Third level of the void initiation stage. He'd broken through. As he felt the vast origin energy in his body, and especially when he saw the nascent soul within his dantian that was becoming more and more illusory, Duan Lingtian's mood couldn't help but surge. The increase in his strength also gave Duan Lingtian a strong sense of confidence. After all, his confidence had been struck black and blue by Han Xuanai on more than one occasion before this. But now that he'd broken through to the third level of the void initiation stage, he'd gotten over it. Every single person had their own fortuitous encounters. Just like Han Xuanai. The reason why she had such a terrifying cultivation was because of her extraordinary background. In the past, I'd underestimated the power behind Xuanai. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto Han Xuanai, who sat nearby and cultivated with her eyes closed, and he sighed in his heart. At that time, I thought that the power Xuanai belonged to would at most provide her with various spirit fruits. Now, based on the ice concept that Xuanai possesses, the power she belongs to might even have the conditions to provide her with concept fragments. Concept fragments. Things that were even more precious than spirit fruits in Cloud Continent. When the martial artists of Cloud Continent were at the Void Realm, they comprehended force and concept. Amongst them, force was only the foundation of concept. At the void initiation stage, one comprehended concept. According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian was deeply aware of it. The concept that void initiation stage martial artists came into contact with was actually only void initiation concept, and it was commonly called elementary concept. Elementary concept was divided into 9 levels. Every increase in level would allow one to gain the strength of an ancient horned dragon. Since there was elementary concept, there was naturally intermediate concept as well. Intermediate concept was the common name of void interpretation concept. If a 9th level void initiation stage martial artist wanted to step into the void interpretation stage, then the martial artist must break through on the foundation of 9th level elementary concept and comprehend intermediate concept. If the martial artist didn't satisfy this condition, then the martial artist would be unable to step into the void interpretation stage. Intermediate concept was similar to elementary concept, and it was divided into 9 levels as well. First level intermediate concept was comparable to the strength of 20 ancient horned dragons. Every increase in level was able to provide an increase of 10 ancient horned dragons' strength. 9th level intermediate concept was comparable to the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons. If a 9th level void interpretation stage martial artist wanted to step into the void transformation stage, it was the same. The martial artist must break through on the foundation of 9th level intermediate concept and comprehend advanced concept. Advanced concept was the common name of void transformation concept. First level advanced concept was comparable to the strength of 200 ancient horned dragons. Every increase in level was able to provide an increase of 100 ancient horned dragons' strength. 9th level advanced concept was comparable to the strength of 1000 ancient horned dragons. On the other hand, to a certain extent, advanced concept had completely surpassed elementary concept and intermediate concept. A martial artist that had comprehended first-level advanced concept would develop a concept fragment in the depths of his mind, and it was similar to the inner core of a fierce beast or demon beast. A concept fragment contained the comprehension of a martial artist that had comprehended advanced concept towards a certain type of advanced concept. This sort of martial artist was usually in existence at the void transformation stage, and once he was killed, his opponent would mercilessly seize his concept fragment. A concept fragment was the concept crystal of a void transformation stage martial artist. If it was obtained by another martial artist that had comprehended a similar concept, then the martial artist would even be able to rely on it to speed up the process of comprehending that concept. Chapter 608. Based on the perception of my spiritual force, Xuanai's current ice concept ought to be intermediate concept without a doubt. Moreover, it's at least at the 7th level. Relying on the lifetime experience of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian was faintly able to deduce the level of ice concept that Xuanai had grasped now. 7th level intermediate concept was equivalent to the strength of 80 ancient horned dragons. Xuanai's strength was regardless of cultivation. Merely the energy of concept was sufficient to cause Duan Lingtian to be extremely shocked. Duan Lingtian, who recovered from his shock, didn't continue cultivating, but instead pulled out the little gold mouse from his sleeve and held it in his hand. This little fellow is actually cultivating as well. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled as he looked at the little gold mouse that lay on his hand without moving. Finding the little gold mouse once more was undoubtedly a matter worthy of being happy to Duan Lingtian. What caused Duan Lingtian to be pleasantly surprised was that the little gold mouse had already advanced into the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse had actually broken through to the void initiation stage as well, and it wasn't just that, she had even comprehended 2nd level lightning concept. After lightly putting down the little gold mouse, Duan Lingtian stood up and walked to stand on the shoulder of the three-eyed flame tiger before looking ahead. Ahead was a boundless expanse of land, and behind this boundless expanse of land, strands of inconspicuous blue could be faintly seen, and it was extremely far away from where he was now. That's the sea. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he thought in his heart. A few days later, Duan Lingtian looked at the expanse of blue that grew closer and closer, and he finally confirmed it. It really is the sea. The distant sea and the azure sky had practically merged into one. The so-called sea and sky merging into one ought to be talking about the scene before my eyes, right? Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Another day and night passed. At this moment, Duan Lingtian, who stood on the shoulder of the three-eyed flame tiger, could feel waves of sea breeze blowing over, and there was even a trace of the smell of the sea mixed within. After coming to this world for so many years, it's still the first time I've seen the sea. Looking at the endless sea before him, Duan Lingtian sighed inwardly. The entire cloud continent was located in the endless ocean. Duan Lingtian had learned this from the memories of the reincarnation Emperor Wu. As for that boundless sea, not even Emperor Wu of Samsara dared to explore it when he was at his peak. The endless sea region was an extremely mysterious existence to the group of experts who stood at the peak of Cloud Continent. No one knew what was on the other side of the sea. That place could be a boundless sea or another continent. It could also be a dangerous place that even a martial emperor would find difficult to defend against. Not long after, Duan Lingtian saw the jade sword enter the sky above the sea and enter deep into the sea. The sword monarch's treasure wouldn't be in the depths of the sea, right? At this moment, someone couldn't help but exclaim. The jade sword has stopped. Suddenly, someone cried out in alarm, attracting everyone's attention. Duan Lingtian glanced over. In the distance, the jade sword that had been moving forward paused in midair. Meanwhile, the three-eyed flame tiger had stopped as well. For a time, Han Xuanai and the little gold mouse who were meditating and cultivating on the back of the three-eyed flame tiger had awoken. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse blinked her hazy eyes, then her body shook before transforming into a golden light that flashed out to descend onto Duan Lingtian's shoulder, and she sized up the scene before her with interest. We've arrived. Han Xuanai arrived by Duan Lingtian's side as well, and she looked at the jade sword in midair with Duan Lingtian. The jade sword stopped there and ceaselessly revolved. Strands of green light suffused out within it. Hiss hiss. Meanwhile, two little pythons came out from beneath Han Xuanai's sleeves, and they flicked their tongues in high spirits. Suddenly, there was movement from the jade sword. Swish! A green light flashed by, and the jade sword actually pierced straight into the calm sea. Along with the jade sword entering, the calm sea started to roil and transform into circle after circle of ripples that spread out, seeming to sparkle under the scorching sun. Big guy, let's go down. Remember to use your origin energy to protect us. Han Xuanai spoke indifferently. The three-eyed flame tiger nodded, then its figure flashed to dive down. At the same time, a layer of milky white light barrier arose on the surface of the three-eyed flame tiger's body, and it was precisely a protective barrier formed from origin energy. Along with the enormous body of the three-eyed flame tiger entering the sea, waves of tempestuous waves charged into the sky with a shocking impetus. With the protection of the three-eyed flame tiger's origin energy barrier, Duan Lingtian, Han Xuanai, and Dong Ming weren't assaulted by the seawater. The sea was completely isolated outside by the origin energy barrier, and it formed a completely different world from the place Duan Lingtian stood. Over there. Suddenly, a wave of voice sounded out through the seawater. It was Elder who'd come with Dong Ming, and he'd noticed the traces of the jade sword in the depths of the sea. Instantly, the three-eyed flame tiger and the remaining group of people went deep into the sea. After a short moment, the group of people entered the deep sea. Within the deep sea, it was completely pitch black like the night, and they could vaguely see some living beings that emitted light circling around everywhere. The milky white origin energy barrier that arose from the three-eyed flame tiger was like a large light bulb that illuminated half the deep sea. Whereas the remaining group of people had their origin energy barriers open as well, and they chased after the jade sword all the way. This is the deep sea. Duan Lingtian sized up the deep sea, and he could see some ferocious beasts within the sea that overestimated their ability and pounced over. However, these ferocious beasts hadn't even approached when they were easily annihilated by the three-eyed flame tiger and the others. For a time, the deep sea was suffused with waves of the smell of blood. Moreover, the ferocious beasts that smelled the smell of blood were even more numerous, and they advanced in succession, as if they couldn't be killed completely. There are no demon beasts here. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be stunned as he gazed at the fresh blood that dyed the seaweed in the deep sea. Logically speaking, if there were demon beasts here, they ought to have smelled the smell of blood since long ago and followed the smell of blood over. Big brother Lingtian, there are naturally demon beasts here. But don't forget, demon beasts are existences that possess the intelligence of humans. They've sensed the big guy's aura from afar, so how could they dare come over and give their lives away? Han Xuanai shook her head and smiled. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding, and only now did he recall that the big fellow beneath his feet was a formidable 9th-level void initiation stage demon beast. How could ordinary demon beasts dare be presumptuous before it? But this place still belongs to the outer sea. Even though there are many demon beasts, the strongest are at most some void initiation stage demon beasts. If we continue heading towards the inner sea, we might even encounter void interpretation stage demon beasts. Han Xuanai continued. Xuanai, you seem to be extremely familiar with the sea. Duan Lingtian asked curiously. He noticed that when Xuanai introduced the sea, she was extremely familiar with it. When I was young, my father didn't have time to accompany me, so I basically asked Qing Nu to bring me to play in the sea. Han Xuanai's face revealed a wisp of sorrow as she sighed. As time passed, the boundless sea became a part of my childhood. When she spoke up to hear, Han Xuanai paused for a moment, and the sorrow on her face vanished without a trace. I heard Qing Nu say that there are even some void transformation stage demons in the depths of the inner sea. If we continue heading towards the core area of the inner sea, we might even encounter demon monarchs and demon emperors. Demon monarchs? Demon emperors? The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched. According to the information he obtained from the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. All those years ago, when Samsara Emperor Wu went deep into the boundless sea, he'd once encountered some demon monarchs and 3 demon emperors. One of the demon emperors had a strength that was even close to him. It was precisely because of this that Samsara Emperor Wu took into account the unknown nature of the boundless sea, so he chose to return to Cloud Continent. Perhaps, if Samsara Emperor Wu continued to go deep into the boundless sea all those years ago, he might even encounter a demon emperor that was stronger than him. This was also the thing that Samsara Emperor Wu was most worried about. In Duan Lingtian's opinion, Samsara Emperor Wu's choice at that time was undoubtedly wise. When Dong Ming, who stood nearby, heard Han Xuanai, he was terrified to the point his face went pale. For the first time, he felt that. So it turned out that the sea was so terrifying as well. He originally thought that only existences at the void transformation stage and above existed in the foreign lands. Who knew that there were even existences in the sea? Swish! Yu Jian led the way in front while Duan Lingtian and the others followed behind. The deep sea was originally extremely quiet, and Duan Lingtian's group had broken the silence as they moved through it. All along the way, the glowing seaweed and various deep-sea creatures entered their eyes, and it caused Duan Lingtian and the others to be slightly dazzled. We're still going down. Duan Lingtian's brows raised. He noticed that the origin energy light barriers on the surface of the bodies of some of the 11 people with comparatively weaker cultivations had already started to tremble. In the deep sea, the deeper one went, the greater the pressure. All of you, come in. After another period of time, Duan Lingtian noticed that the origin energy light barriers on the surface of their bodies were already on the verge of collapse, and he spoke to them. The few of them felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders when they heard this, and they passed through the origin energy light barriers on the surface of the 3-eyed flame tiger's body before descending onto its back. Thank you. The few of them looked at Duan Lingtian and repeatedly thanked him. Duan Lingtian nodded lightly and paid no further attention to them. The few of them weren't angry. To them, this young man being able to lend them a helping hand at this moment had already caused them to be extremely grateful. Moreover, when they left this place later on, they would probably have to rely on this 3-eyed flame tiger and ask for help from him. When they thought up to here, they completely lost their temper. We've arrived at the bottom of the sea. Suddenly, the old man in green who was walking at the very front stopped in his tracks. Meanwhile, everyone saw it once more. The jade sword that led them forward had stopped within the sea now, and it was ceaselessly revolving as if it was searching for the location of the sword monarch's treasure. When they arrived at the bottom of the sea, it was a completely different scene. It was peerlessly beautiful and dazzling. Swish! Suddenly, the jade sword moved and flashed directly to the side of the sea. Everywhere the jade sword passed, Duan Lingtian and the others chased after it, causing the half of the sea that was pitch black like ink to become bright as day for a time. In next to no time, a tall mountain at the bottom of the sea appeared before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and the others. This tall mountain was an entire few hundred meters tall. And on the side of the mountain facing them, there stood a magnificent door. The door was ancient and aged. Even though it was deep within the sea, it didn't suffer any corrosion, and it was obviously constructed from unusual materials. When the jade sword arrived before the door, it lost its luster and fell down. We've arrived. The eyes of many lit up. This is the door to the sword monarch's treasure. As he looked at the door before him, Duan Lingtian's heart trembled slightly. Chapter 609. The door of the sword monarch's treasure that was at the bottom of the sea before him caused Duan Lingtian to be shocked. According to the memories of Emperor Wu of Samsara. Even if it was Emperor Wu of Samsara all those years ago, even though he'd played many similar games, it wasn't exaggerated and exhausting to such an extent. The martial monarch that left behind this sword monarch's treasure seems to have gone a bit too far. Even though he thought like this in his heart, Duan Lingtian didn't feel there was anything wrong with it. Perhaps the martial monarch that left behind the sword monarch's treasure was more playful. How do we enter? In next to no time, someone noticed this problem. For a time, the gazes of everyone including Duan Lingtian started to revolve around the door of the sword monarch's treasure and size it up. They wanted to find the method to open it. After looking for a long time, everyone was still bewildered. According to rumor, the 9 jade swords are the key to open the sword monarch's treasure. But there isn't even a single keyhole on this door. Someone frowned. Looks like we can only force our way in. A blue-clothed middle-aged man took a step forward, and with a raise of his hand, his origin energy skyrocketed while his concept followed like a shadow as it pressed down towards the door of the sword monarch's treasure. Bang! An enormous bang sounded out as the seawater roiled and became extremely muddy. At the same time, it shocked many underwater creatures to the point they fled in all directions as if they were fleeing for their lives. These underwater creatures couldn't even be considered as wild beasts, and they didn't possess the slightest offensive strength. The blue-clothed middle-aged man's attack caused quite a commotion, yet the door of the sword monarch's treasure didn't move in the slightest. What a firm door! The blue-clothed middle-aged man had a shocked expression as he looked at the door of the sword monarch's treasure. He was in existence at the 7th level of the void initiation stage at any rate, but even if he exerted his full strength and utilized his concept, the door of the sword monarch's treasure actually didn't move in the slightest. Humph. Han Xuanai, who stood by Duan Lingtian's side, grunted lightly and mocked. Don't forget that this sword monarch's treasure is a treasure vault left behind by a martial monarch. A martial monarch is an existence that surpasses the void transformation stage. The things he left behind, not to mention you, a void initiation stage martial artist, even a void transformation stage martial artist may not be able to destroy them. Hearing Han Xuanai's words, the blue-clothed middle-aged man smiled awkwardly. I was reckless. Making a move in front of Miss is like showing off in front of an expert. Young Miss, I wonder if you have a way to open the door to the sword monarch's treasure. If we can't open this door, then our trip today will be in vain. A green-clothed old man looked at Han Xuanai respectfully and asked. Instantly, besides Duan Lingtian, who was still sizing up the door of the sword monarch's treasure from top to bottom, Duan Lingtian was still in a daze. Everyone looked at Han Xuanai. Han Xuanai was, without a doubt, the most powerful existence in this group. Being stared at by so many people, Han Xuanai frowned unhappily. Didn't you hear what I just said? This is the treasure vault left behind by a martial monarch. Not to mention me, even a void transformation martial artist would be powerless, let alone a martial artist like me who has yet to step into the void transformation stage. Everyone was slightly embarrassed when they heard this. But when they heard the young girl, they finally confirmed one thing. That was, the young girl wasn't a demon. If she was a demon, then it was impossible for her to not possess a cultivation at the void transformation stage. Looks like this young girl ought to be a junior disciple from a formidable power in the foreign lands. She's already broken through to the void interpretation stage at such a young age. Exactly how formidable is the power she belongs to? The same thought emerged in the hearts of many people, and they were extremely shocked. This was even more shocking than the young girl being a demon. No matter how strong a demon was, it was still a lone figure, and it was usually in existence at the void transformation stage. Whereas a power that was capable of producing a 15 or 16-year-old void interpretation stage expert was obvious. Even if that power possessed a martial monarch stage expert, they wouldn't be surprised. A 15 or 16-year-old void interpretation stage expert, not to mention the Darkhan dynasty, even in the history of the various dynasties, such a figure had never appeared. It was even to the extent that a void interpretation stage expert below the age of 30 hadn't appeared in the various dynasties. Big brother Ling Tian, have you noticed anything? Xuanai looked at the nearby Duan Ling Tian and asked. The reason she asked this was mainly because she saw Duan Lingtian's eyes suddenly light up. From the beginning until the end, Duan Lingtian's attention had always been on the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Xuanai. Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed as he stared at the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure before him and said slowly, according to legend, the key to open the Sword Monarch's treasure is the 9 jade swords. I feel that if I want to open it, I have to start from the 9 jade swords. Humph. Han Xuanai hadn't spoken when the green-clothed old man that stood at the side of the entrance to the Sword Monarch's treasure, Elder Hu that had come with Dong Ming, had already ridiculed. All of us know what you're talking about, not to mention there isn't even a single keyhole that can accommodate a jade sword on the door. Even if there really are 9 keyholes, how are you going to open it now that the 9 jade swords have already fused into one? Elder Hu's words obtained the agreement of many people including Dong Ming. Old bastard. Why are you interrupting when my big brother Ling Tian is speaking? If you're tired of living, then this young miss doesn't mind sending you on your way. Han Xuanai was displeased when she saw Elder Hu ridiculing Duan Ling Tian, and she exploded with rage. Since a young age, because of her special identity, besides a little sister of similar age, she didn't have any other friends amongst her peers. Practically all the other people of the same age looked up to her, and every single one of them was reverent and respectful to her. Every time she saw someone else being doted on by an older brother or sister, she would feel a wave of envy in her heart. Until she met Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian didn't treat her like those people by her side in the past, and he completely treated her as a little sister, causing her to experience the warmth of an older brother for the first time. Since that time, she'd taken Duan Ling Tian to be her older brother, and she enjoyed the care and concern of her older brother. Now, someone actually dared ridicule her older brother? Whoosh! Along with Han Xuanai speaking, strands of coldness arose around her for no reason or rhyme. The coldness was extremely cold, and it swept out. For a moment, the seawater was turbulent, and it was greatly affected. After a while, some of the seawater at the bottom of the sea even condensed into pieces of ice and fell to the ground. The amount of ice shards was still increasing. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the seawater around the bottom of the sea where everyone was at would condense into ice. Elder Hu's expression changed drastically. Only then did he remember how terrifying this young girl in yellow was. She wasn't someone he could deal with. Now, he wished he could slap himself in the face. Why did he have to say so much? He was simply asking for trouble. Young miss, I don't think this senior has any ill intentions. Someone looked at Han Xuanai and advised softly. Yes, this senior is also thinking for the common interests of everyone, so he's a little impulsive. Please calm down, young Mississippi. Many people followed suit. Now, in their eyes, this young girl in yellow in front of them was a living Yama who controlled their lives. If the young girl continued like this, they would undoubtedly become the burial objects of the old man in green. The extremely icy coldness was still ceaselessly rising. It probably wouldn't be long before the surrounding seawater would transform into ice, whereas, they would be frozen within it and have a slim chance of survival. Unless they left now and abandoned the Sword Monarch's treasure and everything within it. But how could they be willing to leave just like this? They'd been looking forward to this day for a long time. Now, everyone present hated Elder Hu to the extreme. If it wasn't for him, how could the young girl be enraged? Brother Ling Tian. Dong Ming looked at Duan Ling Tian with a gaze filled with a pleading expression. As far as he was concerned. Now, only Duan Ling Tian was capable of calming the young girl's rage. Forget it, Xuanai. Duan Ling Tian glanced coldly at the old man, then looked at Han Xuanai and said with a light smile, there's no need to get angry with some people, just take his words as nonsense. Moreover, if a dog bites us, we can't bite it back, right? What difference would that make us from a dog? Duan Lingtian's words caused the gazes of everyone to become strange. Elder Hu's face went grim. This Duan Lingtian said he was a dog. The corners of Han Xuanai's mouth trembled slightly as a trace of a smile appeared on her face. At the same time, the coldness on her body was restrained, but her eyes that were filled with rage still stared at Elder Hu. Apologize to Big Brother Ling Tian, otherwise, die. When everyone present heard Han Xuanai's furious and overbearing words, they felt a chill run down their spines. They didn't doubt the young girl's words in the slightest. They'd witnessed the young girl's strength with their own two eyes. Elder Hu's face went grim. She wanted him to apologize to someone that had just insulted him. As an 8th level void initiation stage martial artist, he had his own dignity. But now, when he felt the killing intent contained within the young girl's eyes, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Especially now, when numerous rapid sound transmissions pierced into his ears. Without exception, all these voice transmissions were from everyone present, and all of them were advising him to apologize. This time, he'd obviously incurred the wrath of everyone. In the end, Elder Hu gritted his teeth and took a deep breath before looking at Duan Lingtian. I'm sorry. Duan Lingtian nodded indifferently. Xuanai. When the others heaved a sigh of relief, Duan Lingtian looked at Han Xuanai. Pick up that jade sword and pass it to me. Presently, Duan Lingtian felt that it was difficult for the light barrier formed from his origin energy to resist the water pressure at the bottom of the sea. So he was unable to pick up the jade sword on the ground outside the Sword Monarch's treasure himself. Even though she didn't know what Duan Lingtian wanted to do, Han Xuanai still flew out and propped up an origin energy light barrier on her body before grabbing the jade sword with a raise of her hand. In the blink of an eye, she'd returned to Duan Lingtian's side and passed the jade sword to Duan Lingtian. Big Brother Lingtian, what do you want this jade sword for? It's nothing, I just want to test if my guess is correct. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly. For a time, the gazes of everyone descended onto Duan Lingtian, and they were curious about what Duan Lingtian wanted to do. Squeak squeak. Chapter 610. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons were the same. They stuck their heads out from under Xuanai's sleeves and stared at Duan Lingtian with interest. Now, Duan Lingtian, who'd attracted the gazes of everyone, held the jade sword in his hand. Subsequently, his origin energy fused into it. I hope my guess isn't wrong. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. According to Duan Lingtian's guess, the reason the jade sword in his hand was able to transform into 9 swords and fuse into one was very likely because it was inscribed with some sort of miraculous inscription formation. It was precisely because of this that the jade sword was able to combine 9 swords into one. Reincarnation Emperor Wu had encountered this sort of inscription formation all those years ago. Although he couldn't be considered to have dabbled in it, he knew a certain principle. Whoosh! Along with Duan Lingtian's origin energy fusing into the jade sword, a milky white flame rose explosively and burned brilliantly. What does he want to do? This was the thought of most people present. Big Brother Lingtian. Han Xuanai looked at Duan Lingtian, and her clear eyes that were like water had a trace of anticipation mixed within. Humph. As for the azure-clothed old man, Elder Hu, who stood at the side in the distance, he grunted in his heart, and his eyes flickered with mischief. Let's see how you embarrass yourself. Elder Hu slightly took pleasure in Duan Lingtian's misfortune. There's a chance. The eyes of Duan Lingtian, who originally had a serious expression, flashed abruptly, and a smile bloomed on his face. Duan Lingtian's origin energy fused into the jade sword, and sure enough, he noticed traces of inscriptions. Moreover, it wasn't just a single trace, there were an entire 9 traces, and they formed a miraculous inscription formation. It's exactly the same as the inscription formation Emperor Wu had the fortune to see that day. Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief. Looks like his guess was right. Since it can combine 9 swords into one, it can naturally divide one sword into 9. With a thought, Duan Lingtian's origin energy fused into the inscription formation and started to interfere with the circulation of the 9 inscriptions. After a short moment, Whoosh! The jade sword in Duan Lingtian's hand suddenly emitted a bright green brilliance. It was like a scorching sun, causing everyone present to subconsciously close their eyes. Even Han Xuanai was no exception. When they regained their senses, they were completely dumbfounded. Heavens! What did they see? In the distance, the purple-clothed youth stood there, faintly exuding a trace of mystery. Of course, this was the thought that suddenly rose in their hearts. The most important thing was the 9 jade swords in the hands of the purple-clothed youth. The jade sword has been divided into 9 again. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief. Some people even fiercely rubbed their eyes, thinking that they were seeing things. Only when they rubbed their eyes and saw that Duan Lingtian still had 9 jade swords in his hand did they confirm it. The jade swords were truly divided into 9 swords. Brother Lingtian, how did you do it? Han Xuanai's eyes lit up. She looked at Duan Lingtian in surprise. Even though she possessed an extraordinary background, it was the first time she'd seen such a miraculous thing. The 9 jade swords that had fused into one had actually split apart once more now. I don't know as well. I just fused my origin energy into it, and then it split into 9. The complexity of an inscription formation was something that an outsider wouldn't know, and only an inscription master would understand. So Duan Lingtian only shrugged and casually replied, and he didn't speak the truth. But Han Xuanai wasn't so easily deceived. She glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian and said via voice transmission, Brother Lingtian, you must tell me how you did it after we come out from the Sword Monarch's treasure. When I picked up the jade sword earlier, I fused my origin energy into it to investigate, yet it didn't have any reaction. Whereas in your hands, it directly split into 9. You've surely done something else. Han Xuanai finished speaking in a single breath. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. This little girl is really quick-witted, she's even able to see through this. Alright, I'll tell you in detail after we come out from the Sword Monarch's treasure. Wait. How do you know I'm able to open the Sword Monarch's treasure? As Duan Lingtian finished speaking, he shuddered and asked Han Xuanai. After all, the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure was completely flat, and there wasn't a single keyhole. Brother Lingtian, I believe you surely have a way. Han Xuanai said. Duan Lingtian was slightly speechless. This little girl trusts me so much. But needless to say, the feeling of being worshipped like this was extremely satisfying, especially being worshipped by a monstrous genius like Han Xuanai. It caused Duan Lingtian to feel slightly complacent. Brother Lingtian, now that the jade sword has split into 9, what do you want to do? Dong Ming looked at Duan Lingtian and asked curiously. Presently, Dong Ming's face faintly contained slight admiration mixed within. Even though Duan Lingtian had spoken of it simply earlier. But he understood in his heart that all of this was impossible to be as simple as it seemed on the surface. Otherwise, why would Duan Lingtian be the only one who thought of doing this? Since everyone present was in existence at the void initiation stage or above, then it meant that there weren't any idiots. There's no need for me after this. Duan Lingtian shook his head. Under the astounded gazes of everyone, Duan Lingtian released his hand that held the 9 jade swords. Subsequently, the 9 jade swords flew out and flashed directly towards the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure, and they seemed to have transformed into 9 jade green bolts of lightning, at practically the instant the 9 jade swords flew out. Under the gazes of everyone present, 9 holes that flickered with white lights appeared out of thin air on the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Or more precisely speaking, it was 9 keyholes. Swish! 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 The 9 jade swords flashed out and flashed through the seawater as they emitted a wave of sword howls. In next to no time, the 9 jade swords aimed at the 9 keyholes on the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure and fiercely collided with them. Clang! 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 The 9 jade swords just happened to aim at the 9 keyholes and perfectly inserted themselves into them. Right at this moment, 9 strong lights flashed, causing everyone including Duan Lingtian to be unable to refrain from closing their eyes. When they opened their eyes once more, they noticed that the 9 jade swords had actually perfectly fused together with the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Rumble, suddenly, the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure trembled. A wave of rumbling clearly entered into the ears of Duan Lingtian and the others, and it reverberated in their ears like thunder. The speed of sound traveling through the water wasn't the slightest bit slower than the speed of sound traveling through the air. At the same time, the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure moved upwards and gradually vanished before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and the others. What's that? Origin Energy Light Barrier. It actually completely isolated the seawater outside. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in shock. Meanwhile, the others clearly noticed that after the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure was opened, a layer of translucent light barrier appeared before their eyes. Behind the light barrier was an expanse of gray and hazy, and it seemed as if there were dark and heavy clouds moving rhythmically, causing them to be unable to see the situation within clearly. It's an inscription formation again. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted as his heart trembled slightly. Could it be that the martial monarch that left behind the Sword Monarch's treasure was an inscription master as well? First, it was the miraculous inscription formation that combined 9 swords into one and 9 swords into one. Now, it's an inscription formation that isolates the seawater. Duan Lingtian sighed with emotion in his heart. 2 types of inscription formations. The former was something that even Emperor Wu of Samsara hadn't touched upon all those years ago. Because of this, Emperor Wu of Samsara even felt regretful. On the other hand, the latter was comparatively more ordinary. So long as Duan Lingtian's strength was sufficient, and so long as he possessed sufficient materials, he would be able to set it up as well. Amazing. It's all thanks to Brother Lingtian. Yeah, otherwise, we would probably be refused entry today. Instantly, everyone present looked at Duan Lingtian and sighed with admiration, and they weren't stingy with their praise in the slightest. Even though Duan Lingtian spoke of splitting a sword into 9 in a casual manner. But everyone present was experienced, so how could they be unable to discern that Duan Lingtian spoke half-heartedly? As far as they were concerned. If Duan Lingtian didn't make a move, then even if they arrived before the door of the Sword Monarch's treasure, they would probably be unable to enter. Humph. Right at this moment, Elder Hu who stood in the distance grunted coldly, and his figure flashed out to be the first to charge towards the light barrier formed by the inscription formation that isolated the seawater. Elder Hu's figure easily fused into the light barrier. In the blink of an eye, he vanished before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and the others. The smile on Han Xuanai's face was restrained when she saw this scene, and her eyes flickered with cold lights. As the greatest contributor, Big Brother Lingtian hasn't entered yet. This old bastard actually dares to enter the Sword Monarch's treasure before us. I hope I don't see him again, otherwise, I'll surely kill him. As Han Xuanai finished speaking, her tone was filled with ruthlessness. Yet this time, no one sympathized with Elder Hu. All of them felt that Elder Hu had gone too far. Amongst them included Dong Ming. Dong Ming glanced at Duan Lingtian with slight embarrassment. Brother Lingtian, I'm sorry. Elder Hu's temper is like this, I hope you can forgive him. How about this? Since Elder Hu is the first to enter the Sword Monarch's treasure, for the sake of fairness, I'll be the last to enter amongst all of us. How about it? I advise you to stay away from him. If he encounters any treasure within the Sword Monarch's treasure, then a person like him might be the first to kill you and take the treasure for himself. Duan Lingtian had an indifferent expression. As far as he was concerned, that old fellow would die sooner or later. He'd endured it over and over again, and it was none other than because he had the intention of allowing that old fellow to lead the way. Even though that old fellow was extremely detestable. But needless to say, his strength wasn't bad, and he was extremely useful within the Sword Monarch's treasure. Dong Ming sighed and didn't say anything further. Brother Lingtian, young Miss Xuanai, please go ahead. Meanwhile, the others moved aside successively, and then they looked at Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai as they spoke. Xuanai, let's go in. Duan Lingtian nodded to Xuanai, and then the two of them brought along the little gold mouse and two little pythons to fly towards the translucent light barrier at the entrance of the Sword Monarch's treasure. During this entire process, the origin energy on Han Xuanai's body skyrocketed to envelop Duan Lingtian as well, and she protected Duan Lingtian as they passed through the light barrier and entered the Sword Monarch's treasure. Before Han Xuanai entered the Sword Monarch's treasure, she didn't forget to instruct the three-eyed flame tiger. Big guy, obediently wait here for us to come out. If we don't see you when we come out, then I'll surely freeze you into a popsicle. Chapter 611. When they heard Han Xuanai's words and noticed the movements of the three-eyed flame tiger, the corners of the mouths of everyone that hadn't entered the Sword Monarch's treasure twitched. Only now did they realize that the reason the three-eyed flame tiger was so afraid of the young woman was because it had once been frozen into a popsicle by the young woman. As expected of a void interpretation stage expert, she's easily able to use ice concept to freeze a 9th level void initiation stage demon beast into a popsicle. Many people sighed in their hearts. Subsequently, everyone passed through the translucent light barrier at the entrance of the Sword Monarch's treasure and entered the Sword Monarch's treasure. Dong Ming did as he said and chose to be the last to enter. Behind the translucent light barrier, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai felt their bodies ceaselessly descending. After descending for over 10 breaths of time, the gray and misty clouds and mist before their eyes vanished. A boundlessly vast cavern appeared before their eyes. Bang! 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 Right at this moment, a wave of enormous bangs sounded out from ahead, and it clearly entered into the ears of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. When the two of them flashed forward, they quickly saw the figure of the azure-clothed old man, Elder Hu. Presently, Elder Hu was standing together with over 10 translucent human-shaped silhouettes. These human-shaped silhouettes all possessed extraordinary strength. Of course, none of them were as strong as Elder Hu. But every time these human-shaped silhouettes were crushed by Elder Hu, they would condense once more, and they were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. Origin Shadow Puppets. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted as he looked at the human-shaped silhouettes that weren't afraid of death as they fought Elder Hu. Looks like the martial monarch that left behind the Sword Monarch's treasure is really an inscription master. Origin Shadow Puppets are only condensed by a martial monarch stage inscription master with an inscription formation. Duan Lingtian gasped. Inscription formations were extremely profound. To a certain extent, martial monarch stage inscription masters were able to set up some inscription formations that were difficult for ordinary people to imagine. Amongst them was the Origin Shadow Inscription Formation. The nascent image inscription formation was an inscription formation that used origin stones as the foundation of the formation and supported the construction of various inscriptions. This kind of inscription pattern formation did not have any specific offensive power. However, once someone passed by the place where the inscription formation was set up, the inscription formation would automatically activate and mobilize the energy within the origin stones to condense origin shadow puppets. There were strong and weak origin shadow puppets, and the specifics still depended on the level of the inscription formation. An origin shadow inscription formation set up by a martial monarch stage inscription master was completely capable of condensing an origin shadow puppet with a cultivation at the void prying stage or above. Among the origin shadow puppets, the stronger ones were at the void ascension stage and void transformation stage. As for the void transformation stage origin shadow puppet, it wasn't something a martial monarch stage inscription master could condense with an inscription formation. If it was the reincarnation Emperor Wu, he would be completely capable of condensing a void transformation stage origin shadow puppet with the origin shadow inscription formation. However, the origin shadow puppet would at most be at the 9th level of the void transformation stage. Moreover, the greatest weakness of the origin shadow puppet is that it doesn't have force or concept to rely on. So even if it's an origin shadow puppet with a cultivation at the void transformation stage, it wouldn't be able to develop a concept fragment. The records related to the origin shadow puppets in the memories of the reincarnation Emperor Wu flashed within Duan Lingtian's mind. These 10+ origin shadow puppets only have a cultivation at the 4th level of the void initiation stage, and they who don't have concept to rely on are at most able to exert the strength of 6 ancient horned dragons. This old fellow is really looking for trouble, and he's actually wasting time with the origin shadow puppets. So long as the origin stones within the origin shadow inscription formation at the area he's at aren't completely exhausted, then the origin shadow puppets will never vanish. Duan Lingtian was slightly speechless towards Elder Hu ceaselessly destroying the origin shadow puppets. This old fellow probably doesn't even know what an origin shadow puppet is. It would be great if I'm able to obtain some origin stones from this sword monarch's treasure. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and he felt slight anticipation. Origin stones were commonly used by foreign lands' martial artists to assist in their cultivation. Gold and silver were completely worthless in the foreign lands. The currency that circulated in the foreign lands wasn't gold and silver, but origin stones instead. When martial artists absorbed origin stones to cultivate, it was much more efficient than purely absorbing the spirit energy of the heavens and the earth to cultivate. Some martial artists with high natural talent relied on origin stones to cultivate, and they even advanced by leaps and bounds. But unfortunately, the origin stones used to circulate the inscription formation aren't suitable for cultivation due to the structure of the inscription formation being disturbed. Otherwise, I could consider digging out the origin stones within the inscription formation here. Duan Lingtian sighed in his heart and was slightly disappointed. Big brother Lingtian, we don't have to pay attention to these silhouettes and directly walk in. These silhouettes are only origin shadow puppets, and they're unable to pose any threat to us. Han Xuanai's voice transmission entered into Duan Lingtian's ears in a timely manner. If an origin shadow puppet catches up to us, then we'll directly make a move and destroy it. So long as we leave the area of effect of the origin shadow inscription formation that condenses the origin shadow puppets, then the origin shadow puppets won't attack us again. Obviously, Han Xuanai knew about origin shadow puppets and even knew about the origin shadow inscription formation. Of course, she didn't know that Duan Lingtian knew even more about this type of inscription formation than she did. But Duan Lingtian didn't expose her and only replied. All right. Swoosh. Swoosh. Their figures flashed out as if they'd transformed into 2 bolts of lightning that flashed out directly. After a short moment, they'd caught up to Elder Hu. Elder Hu's face sank when he saw Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai who'd caught up to them, and slight fear appeared in his eyes. Big brother Lingtian, I don't want to see this old bastard again. Han Xuanai spoke to Duan Lingtian as she used a fierce gaze to examine Elder Hu. Xuanai, there's no need to pay attention to him now. It wouldn't be too late to kill him after we've finished searching the Sword Monarch's treasure. At that time, no matter what he gains in the Sword Monarch's treasure, it'll all belong to us. Duan Lingtian shook his head and rejected Han Xuanai's plan. Han Xuanai pondered for a moment before agreeing in the end. Then we'll let him live for a few more days. Swoosh. 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 When Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai passed by the area Elder Hu was at, 20+ origin shadow puppets condensed in the sky and flashed directly towards them. The 2 of them who were prepared since long ago didn't panic and easily destroyed these origin shadow puppets. When the origin shadow puppets condensed once more, they flashed all the way in. After annihilating 2 waves of origin shadow puppets, there were finally no more origin shadow puppets that chased after them. Alright, we've already left the origin shadow inscription formation. Meanwhile, Han Xuanai spoke to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian nodded. Let's continue in and take a look. All along the way, even though those origin shadow puppets that attacked Duan Lingtian were existences at the 4th level of the void initiation stage, but because they didn't have concept to rely on. In terms of strength, they were far inferior to Duan Lingtian. Even though Duan Lingtian was only a third-level void initiation stage martial artist, he'd comprehended concept energy and coupled with his spirit weapon to rely on, he was easily capable of destroying origin shadow puppets at this level. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai continued to go deeper. In the end, they experienced a few more similar areas enveloped by the origin shadow inscription formation. The further they went, the stronger the origin shadow puppets became. Gradually, it was slightly strenuous for Duan Lingtian to deal with them. But with Han Xuanai present, they easily crushed all the origin shadow puppets. In the end, the two of them arrived at the end of the vast cavern. Duan Lingtian's gaze was sharp, and he noticed a stone platform in the distance with a single glance, and a box was placed on the stone platform. The box was covered in dust. "There's a flight of stairs behind it." Han Xuanai's voice sounded out in a timely manner, and it clearly entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Only now did Duan Lingtian notice that behind the stone platform the box was on was a flight of stairs that led down. That place seemed to lead to another space. "Let's see what's in the box first." Han Xuanai's speed was swift, and she directly arrived before the box before raising her hand to wipe away the dust on it before opening the box. Inside the box, there was an emerald jade piece and a sword-shaped fragment lying there quietly. "It's a sound transmission jade slip." Duan Lingtian recognized the jade slip, and he stretched out his hand to pick it up before fusing his origin energy into it. On the other hand, the nearby Han Xuanai's gaze descended onto the sword-shaped fragment, and her eyes lit up abruptly. "Sword concept fragment? That martial monarch is really generous." Concept fragments were fragments that contained advanced concept that only experts at the void transformation stage or above were capable of developing. Once these concept fragments that contained advanced concept were obtained by someone that had comprehended the same concept, the person would be able to rely on it to swiftly advance that concept. Whereas this concept fragment now belonged to the sword concept soul fragment. If it was obtained by a martial artist that had comprehended sword concept, then that martial artist would rely on it to comprehend sword concept and advance by leaps and bounds. Even if it was a martial artist with low comprehension ability, the improvement in sword concept would far exceed those martial artists with extraordinary comprehension ability. If it was obtained by a martial artist with high comprehension ability, then the advancement in sword concept would be even more terrifying. Unfortunately, Big Brother Ling Tian, Little Black, Little White, and Little Gold are unable to use it. Han Xuanai shook her head. Meanwhile, after Duan Lingtian's origin energy fused into the voice transmission jade slip, a steady voice sounded out. "No matter who you are, since you've obtained the voice transmission jade slip, then you've passed the test of the first level of the cenotaph I left behind. The reward of the first level of the test is a sword concept soul fragment. So long as a martial artist that has comprehended sword concept relies on this soul fragment, then the martial artist will be able to swiftly advance their sword concept to third level advanced sword concept." The voice vanished at this point. Sword concept soul fragment. Duan Lingtian returned to his senses and looked at the sword-shaped fragment in Han Xuanai's hand. This sword-shaped fragment looked no different than an ordinary glass fragment, but when Duan Lingtian's spiritual force touched it, he was able to sense an extremely fierce aura sweep out and instantly disperse his spiritual force. Not only that. Instantly, Duan Lingtian felt his vital energy and blood roil, and a sweetness rose from his throat that was difficult to restrain. Pooh! In the end, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. "Big Brother Ling Tian, what's wrong?" Chapter 612. It's nothing. Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand to wipe off the bloodstains on the corners of his mouth and shook his head. But when he looked once more at the sword concept fragment in Han Xuanai's hand, there seemed to be slight fear in the depths of his eyes. A mere concept fragment had directly crushed his spiritual force. That fierce aura is obviously sword concept. Moreover, it's even advanced sword concept. Duan Lingtian gasped. Fortunately, it was only instinctively protecting itself earlier. Otherwise, I'm afraid not only would it have crushed my spiritual force, it would have even injured my soul. Advanced concept was also known as void transformation concept. It was a concept grasped by a void transformation stage expert, and its might was shocking. Not to mention anything else, just take this sword concept fragment as an example. According to the voice transmission Jade slip from before, the martial monarch that was suspected to have left behind a message in the sword monarch's treasure. This concept fragment was a third-level advanced sword concept fragment. Third-level advanced concept was comparable to the strength of 400 ancient horned dragons. The strength of 400 ancient horned dragons, what sort of concept was that? Even if it was a 9th-level void interpretation stage martial artist, regardless of the concept he comprehended, his origin energy when fully exerted would only be comparable to the strength of 120 ancient horned dragons. Even if the 9th-level intermediate concept that was comparable to the strength of 100 ancient horned dragons was included, it would only be the strength of 220 ancient horned dragons. It was even to the extent that even a 9th-level void interpretation stage martial artist that had comprehended 1st-level advanced concept would only possess the strength of 320 ancient horned dragons when exerting his full strength without using a spirit weapon. The strength of 400 ancient horned dragons was undoubtedly an astronomical figure to Duan Lingtian, who didn't even possess the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons when fully exerted. Moreover, this strength was contained within this tiny concept fragment. Big brother Lingtian, here. Han Xuanai casually tossed the concept fragment in her hand to Duan Lingtian as if she was throwing trash. This concept fragment is useless to us. A concept fragment was something that only a martial artist that had comprehended a concept would be able to rely on it to comprehend a higher level concept. Just like Duan Lingtian. Unless he had comprehended sword concept, even if it was only 1st-level elementary sword concept. Otherwise, this concept fragment would be useless in his hands. However, Duan Lingtian still grabbed the concept fragment like it was a treasure. What a joke! Even to void interpretation stage martial artists and some void transformation stage powerhouses, this concept fragment was an existence similar to a treasure. If he took it out, even 9th-level void interpretation stage experts and void transformation stage experts that had comprehended sword concept yet hadn't comprehended 3rd-level advanced sword concept or above would fight to the death for it. Big brother Lingtian, we should go down. It wasn't until Han Xuanai's voice came from the stairs in front that Duan Lingtian came back to his senses. Put it away first. After putting away the sword concept fragment in his hand, Duan Lingtian responded to Xuanai and walked down the stairs with her. At this moment, Duan Lingtian was trying his best to restrain his excitement. The stairs were extremely long, and ahead of them was an expanse of gray and hazy mist, causing them to be unable to see clearly what was behind them. Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai moved through the mist and walked down the stairs all the way until they stepped onto flat ground, and the mist before them gradually vanished before their eyes. Right at this moment. Whoosh! 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 A wave of howls of the wind abruptly sounded out from afar. Duan Lingtian didn't even have the time to raise his head when he felt a wave of strong wind assault him, and it caused the clothes on his body to swell up. When Duan Lingtian raised his head, he saw numerous ceaselessly revolving tornadoes flashing towards him and Han Xuanai. The tornadoes formed a row and filled the vast cavern in the 2nd level of the Sword Monarch's treasure, causing one to have no way out. Now, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai had two choices. The first was to return to the 1st level. The second was to force their way through. So long as they charged through this row of tornadoes that connected the top and bottom of the cavern and formed a defensive barrier, they would be able to continue deeper into the 2nd level. The reward of the 2nd level was surely at the end of the cavern. When he saw this row of tornadoes coming closer and closer, it blew Duan Lingtian's entire body to the point it seemed as if it was about to float up. It's at least a few hundred meters away from me. If it's any closer, then wouldn't I be blown flying by it? Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. Big brother Lingtian, let's charge over. Han Xuanai called out to Duan Lingtian, and then her entire body seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that flashed out to charge towards the row of tornadoes that swept over. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Han Xuanai passed through the row of tornadoes and vanished before Duan Lingtian's eyes. To Han Xuanai, a tornado of this level posed no threat to her at all. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and moved as well. Whirlwind. At the same time that Duan Lingtian's figure flashed out, the origin energy between his legs skyrocketed, and the sound of wind and thunder resounded almost at the same time, traversing across the sky. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into a hurricane as he collided with the row of tornadoes that swept over. For a moment, Duan Lingtian only felt a strong resistance that prevented him from moving forward. This resistance was getting stronger and stronger. Gradually, Duan Lingtian's speed involuntarily slowed down. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue moving forward, but the wind that blew towards him was too strong. This was the might of nature. Duan Lingtian continued to struggle forward, and very soon, he collided with the row of tornadoes. Fortunately, Duan Lingtian raised an origin energy light barrier in time to protect his body. Otherwise, at this very moment, he would probably be directly minced into pieces. However, even so, his origin energy light barrier was still on the verge of collapse. The strength of the tornadoes was too strong. My origin energy light barrier will surely be broken in 5 breaths of time at most. When Duan Lingtian realized this, he became slightly impatient. With his current speed, wanting to break through the obstruction of the tornadoes in a short period of 5 breaths of time was undoubtedly an extremely difficult matter. Now, there are only 2 paths before me. The first is to turn back and return to the first level. The second is to ask Xuanai to help me. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath as his thoughts spun abruptly. He was naturally unwilling to turn back and return to the first level just like this. But asking Xuanai to help him, even though it was a simple matter, yet he was subconsciously unwilling to do this. Could it be that he had to ask Xuanai to help him in everything within the Sword Monarch's treasure? If he didn't have Xuanai, then it would be difficult for him to advance even a single step. If it wasn't for Xuanai lending a hand in the first level of the Sword Monarch's treasure, then even if I was able to pass through, I would surely not have a share of that sword concept fragment. At any rate, he was a man, and Duan Lingtian was unable to rely on Han Xuanai from the beginning until the end. At least, he was unable to ask Han Xuanai for help now. He was unable to pass through this barrier in his heart. Squeak squeak, a sharp cry sounded out by his ears, and it caused Duan Lingtian to return to his senses. Little gold, I'll surely bring you through. Duan Lingtian looked at the little gold mouse on his shoulder, and his gaze became even more tenacious. In the past, I didn't have Xuanai by my side, yet didn't I still pass through by myself? As soon as this thought finished resounding out in his mind, the layer of origin energy light barrier on the surface of Duan Lingtian's body was instantly minced into pieces by the tornadoes. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian's entire body was completely exposed before the tornadoes. Charge! Duan Lingtian gazed ahead, and through the entire row of tornadoes, he could faintly see Han Xuanai who was waiting for him at the other end. Instantly, the origin energy beneath Duan Lingtian's feet skyrocketed, and the sound of wind and thunder was ear-piercing. A layer of earthen yellow energy appeared on the surface of his body, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a cannonball as he charged forward. However, the pressure that came from the tornadoes that covered the sky still fiercely smashed onto his body, and it shook him to the point cracks appeared on the earthen yellow energy on the surface of his body. The earthen yellow energy was precisely the defensive martial skill that Duan Lingtian had executed in a hurry, the Earth Dragon's barrier. But Duan Lingtian had only comprehended elementary earth force after all, and the defensive strength of the Earth Dragon's barrier was extremely weak. In the blink of an eye, it was blasted into pieces by the Dragon Phoenix tornado. He followed in the footsteps of the origin energy light barrier. The strong winds that covered the sky pressed onto Duan Lingtian's body, causing Duan Lingtian's internal organs to tremble, and he was slightly unable to catch his breath. No matter how strong these tornadoes are, it's still wind. Could it be that I, a void initiation stage martial artist that has comprehended first-level wind concept, have to fall at the hands of these tornadoes? Duan Lingtian's heart was filled with unwillingness. On the surface of his body, strands of azure-colored energy were ceaselessly rising. First-level wind concept. However, the first-level wind concept was similarly unable to withstand the pressure of the tornadoes, and it was suppressed in the blink of an eye. When he saw the first-level wind concept was about to be shattered, Duan Lingtian instead calmed down. Tornadoes. Wind. Why must I go head-on against it? A flash of inspiration flashed within his mind, and Duan Lingtian withdrew the first-level wind concept, and his entire body was situated within the tornadoes as he felt the fierce and vast impact of the tornadoes. Gradually, Duan Lingtian seemed to have obtained some sort of comprehension, and he felt as if he'd become light as a feather, as if he'd formed some sort of connection with the tornadoes. He moved along with the wind, and he allowed the tornadoes to carry him upwards. Big Brother Lingtian. Meanwhile, on the other side, Han Xuanai had waited for Duan Lingtian for a while, and when she noticed that Duan Lingtian still hadn't come over, she hurriedly moved out and passed through the tornadoes once more. Right when she intended to help Duan Lingtian, she saw Duan Lingtian who flew along with the tornadoes. At this moment, she even had a misconception. Big Brother Lingtian seemed to have fused into one with the tornadoes. Big Brother Lingtian. What high comprehension ability! Han Xuanai seemed to have discerned something. Swoosh. 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 Right at this moment, numerous figures walked down the stairs from the first floor of the Sword Monarch's treasure and arrived at the second floor. It was precisely the other people that had entered the Sword Monarch's treasure. Instantly, their clothes fluttered, and subsequently, they noticed the row of tornadoes. There's someone within the tornadoes. In next to no time, someone with a sharp gaze noticed the violet-colored figure that was ceaselessly being swept up by the tornadoes. It's Brother Lingtian. Dong Ming exclaimed in shock. Second-level wind concept. Right at this moment, a wave of excited voices suddenly sounded out and drew the attention of everyone. Subsequently, everyone saw. Chapter 6:13. After a short moment, the tornado seemed to have lost its target, and it completely disregarded Duan Lingtian and directly passed through Duan Lingtian. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian floated in midair as strands of azure-colored energy suffused around his body, and two ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared in the sky above him. Second-level wind concept. Duan Lingtian's attainments in wind concept had improved a step. At the bottom of it all, it's all thanks to this tornado. As he looked at the tornado that swept out from the other side, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. At the same time, a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. The breakthrough in wind concept also meant that his strength had improved by a level, and he possessed the strength of an ancient horned dragon. Big Brother Lingtian, your comprehension ability is so high. You actually comprehended second-level wind concept within the tornado. Suddenly, Han Xuanai arrived by Duan Lingtian's side and exclaimed with admiration. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't force himself to merge into the tornado and use it to comprehend wind concept. The risk of doing that was truly too great. Of course, he didn't choose to do that without thinking. Because he knew that once he really encountered danger, Han Xuanai would surely lend a hand to save him. It was precisely because of this that he chose to risk it all. Otherwise, he wouldn't go so far as to gamble with his life. Even though he wasn't willing to rely too much on Han Xuanai, but when it came to a life-and-death crisis, he couldn't care so much. Whoosh! Suddenly, Duan Lingtian heard a wave of wind howling sound out from behind him. Subsequently, a figure took the lead and flashed towards the front of the cavern in a menacing manner. Duan Lingtian looked carefully and recognized this person. It was precisely the azure-clothed old man, Elder Hu. Presently, Elder Hu dashed towards the distance. Suddenly, waves of scorching aura swept over from afar. That's fire. Duan Lingtian's pupils couldn't help but constrict as he looked at the flames that covered the sky and assaulted him. These flames clearly appeared out of thin air. Looks like the second level has many inscription formations as well. Han Xuanai's eyes flickered as she spoke. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. The memories of the Samsara Emperor Wu flashed through his mind. For a time, he had a certain level of understanding towards these inscription formations that could condense tornadoes and flames that filled the sky. Looks like that martial monarch has mastered quite a number of inscription formations. Duan Lingtian sighed. Brother Lingtian, let's go too. When Han Xuanai saw Mr. Hu in the distance pass through the flames and disappear into the flames, she was a little anxious. She took Duan Lingtian's hand and rushed over there. Duan Lingtian could only passively be dragged over by Han Xuanai. When they approached the flames, Duan Lingtian felt his entire body become hot, and sweat couldn't help but drip down his forehead like rain. Sweat dripping down like rain was describing Duan Lingtian at this moment. Right at this moment. Ice. Han Xuanai's voice sounded out coldly. Instantly, an extremely icy cold aura appeared out of thin air, and it was so cold that Duan Lingtian couldn't help but shiver and tremble. At this moment, Duan Lingtian felt as if he was in a world of ice and fire. The icy cold aura temporarily suppressed the flames that covered the sky. Duan Lingtian easily avoided the flames that covered the sky under Han Xuanai's lead. Now, we have both wind and fire in the force of nature. As for water, lightning, and earth, I really jinxed it. While Duan Lingtian was muttering to himself, he could clearly see the surging and rushing water in the distance. The water was like the raging waves in the sea, and its speed was extremely fast. Looking from afar, one could see the waves rolling over one after another. Even though he was extremely far away, Duan Lingtian could still clearly feel a wave of extremely powerful pressure sweeping towards him. Boom! 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 The raging waves became faster and faster, and in a short moment, they were near Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. The raging waves came from above and crashed down fiercely every time. In the entire cavern, there was not a single place that it did not touch. Therefore, in front of the raging waves, even an emptiness realm martial artist would find it difficult to fly away. Condense. Han Xuanai's voice sounded again. Immediately after, Duan Lingtian saw. As Han Xuanai slowly raised her hand, an extremely cold strong wind swept out and swept toward the raging waves that were rolling over, completely freezing them. The raging waves a moment ago had completely calmed down at this moment. To be more precise, it was frozen into ice by Han Xuanai. Ice is made of water, and colder than water. In front of water, ice has long surpassed its master. Looking at the scene before him, Duan Lingtian could not help but have such a thought in his heart. Let's go, brother Lingtian. Han Xuanai stretched out her slender hand again and held Duan Lingtian's hand. She led Duan Lingtian and stepped on the extremely thick and solid ice as they continued to walk inside. Boom! 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 As soon as they passed the test of water, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai heard a series of thunderclaps in the distance. It's the heavenly tribulation. Han Xuanai looked towards the distance and spoke with slight surprise. Duan Lingtian looked over. In the distance, a figure stood in the sky and was resisting the heavenly tribulation that swept down from the sky. This heavenly tribulation looked to be no different than the heavenly tribulation that Duan Lingtian experienced when he'd just broken through to the void prying stage. However, in terms of thickness, these heavenly tribulation were much more terrifying. The thickness of the heavenly tribulation represented the might of the heavenly tribulation to a certain extent. Elder who walked at the front swept through the heavenly tribulation all along the way, and he gradually vanished behind the heavenly tribulation that descended like rain before continuing to head in. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai followed over. The heavenly tribulation that covered the sky was extremely terrifying. If it wasn't for Han Xuanai's assistance, even if Duan Lingtian was able to pass through it, he would probably lose half his life. Wind, fire, water, lightning. I've already experienced the 4 types of energy of nature. Looks like it's extremely likely that the energy of earth will appear later. After passing through the area enveloped by the heavenly tribulation, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. The facts prove that Duan Lingtian's guess was correct. The energy that appeared later was precisely the energy of earth. The ground in the distance suddenly shook as if an intense earthquake had occurred. The ground was torn apart, as if it had turned into a huge spider web. The cracks on the spider web were ceaselessly enlarging, and in the blink of an eye, numerous terrifying chasms were formed. Not only that, there were enormous rolling rocks that covered the sky that swept over from afar, causing the entire cavern to shake as if it had fallen into the end of the world. Presently, even Elder Hu was in a slightly sorry state. Those rolling rocks seemed to be extremely hard. Even if Elder Hu made a move, it was difficult to shatter them, and he could only rely on his movement technique to dodge. Swoosh! Han Xuanai held Duan Lingtian's hand as she took the lead and easily dodged the rolling rocks, and she even surpassed Elder Hu. Now, the energy of earth has appeared as well. It wouldn't be ice at the back, right? Duan Lingtian's heart jerked as he thought to himself. If it was ice, then he wouldn't be afraid since he had Han Xuanai by his side. But the others would probably be struck with misfortune. But this time, Duan Lingtian's thoughts didn't come true. After passing through the area enveloped by the energy of earth, the cavern ahead no longer activated the inscription formation, and it was completely silent. Then, Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai continued forward. A turn appeared in front of them. Behind the turn, a stone platform appeared before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. On the stone platform, there was a single jade piece placed all by itself. But the attention of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai wasn't on the high platform and the jade slip on the high platform. Their gazes were attracted by the 10 stairs behind the stone platform. Before these stairs was a small stone platform, and an exquisite box was placed on the stone platform. The box was spotless, and it seemed as if it wasn't a product of the same era as the box Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai saw on the first level. It's an inscription formation again. When Duan Lingtian's spiritual force swept out and approached the 10 stairs that were distributed all over, he noticed that something was off at the first possible moment. There was an inscription formation enveloping the surroundings of each of these stairs. These inscription formations were recorded in the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. Even though they didn't possess any offensive ability, they had the restriction of allowing entry and not exit. In other words, anyone could choose to enter one of these inscription formations, and they could easily enter without any pressure. However, it was almost impossible for him to get out of there. Unless one possessed a strength that was even more formidable than the person that set up these inscription formations. The person that set up these inscription formations was undoubtedly the martial monarch that left behind the sword monarch's treasure. Not to mention Duan Lingtian and the group of people behind him. Even Han Xuanai's strength was far inferior to a martial monarch stage expert. Big brother Lingtian. Duan Lingtian was still surprised when Han Xuanai's voice had already sounded out, and it contained slight pleasant surprise. Unknowingly, Han Xuanai had already arrived at the nearby stone platform and picked up the jade slip on it. It's a sound transmission jade slip. After Duan Lingtian approached Han Xuanai, he quickly recognized the jade slip. What's recorded in this jade slip? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. Big brother Lingtian, you should listen to it yourself. Han Xuanai passed the jade slip to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand to receive it and fused his origin energy into it, and a wave of clear voice entered into his ears in a timely manner. No matter who it is, it's truly rare to be able to enter the second level of my cenotaph and pass the test of the 5 forces of nature. There's a total of 10 stairs in front of all of you. I presume all of you have seen it as well. These 10 stairs and the boxes on the small stone platforms beside them are all enveloped by the same inscription formation. Once one chooses to enter a certain staircase, one can't leave and can only continue walking. Chapter 6:14. The 10 concept fragments are respectively 2 wind concept fragments, 2 fire concept fragments, 2 lightning concept fragments, 2 water concept fragments, and 2 earth concept fragments. Duan Lingtian found out what was contained within the box on the small stone platform at the side of the 10 stairs ahead from the voice transmission jade slip. Subsequently, a voice sounded out successively from the voice transmission jade slip. The 10 concept fragments, from left to right, are respectively the wind concept fragment, the fire concept fragment, the lightning concept fragment. The message on the voice transmission jade slip described the distribution of concept fragments in detail. Amongst the 10 concept fragments, the worst is a first-level advanced concept fragment, and the best is a 6th-level advanced concept fragment. What level of concept fragment you're able to obtain will depend on your own luck. Besides that, the message also roughly explained the level of the 10 concept fragments. The highest level was a 6th-level advanced concept fragment. What sort of concept was a 6th-level advanced concept? Not to mention anything else, just take the sword concept fragment that Duan Lingtian obtained on the first level as an example. That sword concept fragment was a 3rd-level advanced concept fragment, and the 3rd-level advanced concept contained within it was comparable to the strength of 400 ancient horned dragons. Whereas a 6th-level advanced concept fragment was even more terrifying, and the 6th-level advanced concept within it was comparable to the strength of 700 ancient horned dragons. It was even better than the sword concept fragment. My cenotaph has a total of 3 levels. The 3rd level below here is also the last level, and it changes unpredictably, and the tests for people with different cultivations are different. Only a single person is allowed to enter each stairway. Once someone enters the inscription formation that enveloped the stairway would undergo a change, and it would change from entry but not exit to entry and exit. Whereas after entering the inscription formation and obtaining a concept fragment, there's only a single path, and that is to continue to the 3rd level's test. The way out is in the 3rd level. Besides that, the rewards of the 3rd level's test are the most. The voice stopped abruptly when it spoke up to hear. Duan Lingtian also understood. The sword monarch's treasure seems to be the cenotaph of that martial monarch, and it has a total of 3 levels. The test of the 3rd level is set according to the cultivation of the person that enters the 3rd level. Moreover, only a single person can enter every single staircase that leads to the 3rd level. Duan Lingtian looked at the 10 steps in front of him and his eyes flashed. In other words, among us, only the first 10 people to enter will have a chance to enter the 3rd level. Those who come later will lose their chance. Thinking of this, Duan Lingtian could not wait. Big brother Lingtian, looks like we'll have to part ways here. 5 concept of nature fragments, which one are you going to choose? Han Shu and I looked at Duan Lingtian and asked. Duan Lingtian didn't hesitate, concept of wind fragment. Although Duan Lingtian had some understanding of wind, thunder, and earth, he had only comprehended the 2nd-level elementary concept in the aspect of wind. Lightning was merely the minute force. As for the earth, it was only the force of elementary comprehension. If he chose the wind concept fragment, then once he obtained it, Duan Lingtian would be able to rely on it to comprehend wind concept a step further at the first possible moment. With the assistance of the wind concept fragment and Duan Lingtian's comprehension ability, that wasn't bad. His advancement in wind concept would surely advance by leaps and bounds. 2 wind concept fragments, which one are you going to choose, Big Brother Ling Tian? The quality of these 2 concept fragments might not be the same. Han Xuanai asked again. I'll randomly choose one. Duan Lingtian shrugged and spoke casually. Presently, the people behind hadn't arrived yet, so Duan Lingtian could freely choose. But besides his choice, Duan Lingtian didn't forget the little gold mouse. Little gold, do you see those 10 boxes? Within those boxes. Duan Lingtian told little gold word by word about the profundity of those 10 boxes. 2 lightning concept fragments. Little gold's eyes lit up, and she said with a childish voice, there are records of soul fragments within my inherited memories. That's an extremely formidable thing. Little gold, choose a lightning concept fragment and enter the stairway. I believe that with your strength, you'll surely be able to smoothly pass through the 3rd level's test and obtain numerous rewards. Duan Lingtian encouraged the little gold mouse. Squeak squeak, instantly, the little gold mouse cried out excitedly, and she said with a childish voice, Big Brother Ling Tian, I won't disappoint you. Those 2 are lightning concept fragments, choose one of them. Duan Lingtian pointed at the box that contained the 2 lightning concept fragments as he spoke to the little gold mouse. Squeak! The little gold mouse cried out before transforming into a bolt of lightning that flashed directly towards the box that contained the lightning concept fragment on the right. Along with the little gold mouse opening the box, a violet-colored fragment appeared in her hand. This time, Duan Lingtian didn't dare use his spiritual force to inspect it again. He could only follow the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu to see if there was any other method to discern what level of concept fragment this was. 6th level concept fragment. Duan Lingtian hadn't recovered from his shock when the nearby Han Xuanai had already cried out in surprise. Only advanced concept, void transformation concept, was able to truly condense into form a concept fragment. So, when Xuanai said the violet-colored fragment in the little gold mouse's hand was a 6th level concept fragment, it was undoubtedly a 6th level advanced concept fragment, 6th level advanced lightning concept fragment. Duan Lingtian's face froze. He never imagined that the little gold mouse's luck would be so good to actually choose the highest level concept fragment amongst the 10 concept fragments. When she heard Han Xuanai's voice, little gold cried out complacently before charging towards the stairway. Big Brother Ling Tian, Big Sister Xuanai, I'm going. Before the little gold mouse's figure completely vanished on the stairway, her childish voice sounded out from afar and entered into the ears of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. This little fellow, Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. On the other hand, Han Xuanai started laughing as well. Little Gold's luck isn't bad. I wonder how Little Black and Little White's luck is. Han Xuanai raised her hand and asked the 2 little pythons to come out. Little Black, Little White. Both of you heard what Big Brother Ling Tian said to Little Gold earlier, right? Han Xuanai looked at the 2 little pythons that were slightly eager and asked with a light smile. Hiss hiss, the 2 little pythons flicked their tongues as they nodded. At this moment, their gazes were sizing up the remaining 9 boxes that hadn't been opened, and they were obviously attracted by the concept fragments within them. Little Gold, you've comprehended wind concept, Little White, you've comprehended fire concept. Those 2 boxes contain wind concept fragments, and those 2 boxes contain fire concept fragments. Han Xuanai guided the 2 little pythons. Hiss hiss, the 2 little pythons hurriedly nodded when they heard this. Big Brother, I'm going. Big Brother, Little Black and I will be going first. Before Little Black and Little White transformed into 2 black and white bolts of lightning that flashed out, they didn't forget to send a voice transmission to Duan Lingtian. This caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to refrain from smiling. After a short moment, Little Black withdrew an azure-colored concept fragment from one of the boxes. 3rd level advanced concept fragment. Now, through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian, who knew how to discern the level of a concept fragment from its outer appearance, was able to discern the level of the concept fragment in Little Black's mouth with a single glance. Meanwhile, Han Xuanai exclaimed in a low voice. The little black snake drooped its head and was dispirited when it heard this. It had always taken the little gold mouse to be its opponent. Now, its opponent had obtained a 6th-level advanced concept fragment, whereas, it had only obtained a 3rd-level advanced concept fragment. This caused it to be extremely displeased. Little Black, a 3rd-level advanced concept fragment is already not bad. Go to the 3rd floor. Duan Lingtian smiled as he consoled. As the saying goes, a man whose heart is content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. These words didn't seem to be spoken without reason. Hiss hiss, the little black snake nodded lightly and glanced at Han Xuanai before reluctantly flashing up the stairway and vanishing before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and Han Xuanai. Meanwhile, the little white snake withdrew its fire concept fragment as well. 4th-level advanced concept fragment. Han Xuanai exclaimed in a low voice once more. Before Han Xuanai exclaimed in a low voice, Duan Lingtian had discerned the level of the fire concept fragment hanging in the little white snake's mouth, so he wasn't surprised. The little white snake's eyes flashed when it heard this, and it seemed to be slightly excited. Perhaps it was excited that its choice had surpassed the little black snake. Subsequently, the little white snake entered the stairway as well. For a time, the 3 little fellows each chose a path to enter the 3rd floor. They'd occupied 3 positions to enter the 3rd floor of the Sword Monarch's treasure. There were still 7 positions remaining. Xuanai, which concept fragment do you intend to choose? Duan Lingtian looked at Han Xuanai and asked curiously. Han Xuanai's attainments in ice concept were extremely deep, and he'd witnessed it on many occasions with his own 2 eyes. On the other hand, even though there were 5 types of concept fragments before him, there wasn't any ice concept. I intend to choose an earth concept fragment. Han Xuanai smiled. Duan Lingtian nodded. The earth concept fragment isn't bad. Amongst the concepts of nature, if the earth concept relies on the earth to execute and draws support from the energy of the earth, then it far surpasses the other concepts of nature. Chapter 6:15. However, right at this moment. Don't move. A cold and grim shout sounded out abruptly, causing Elder Hu's figure to stiffen and stop on the spot. Elder Hu turned his head slightly and saw the nearby violet-clothed young man looking at him with an extremely calm expression. Earlier, it was precisely the violet-clothed young man that had shouted out to stop him. Elder Hu's face sank. A mere 3rd-level void initiation stage kid dared be presumptuous before him. But when he thought of the terrifying strength of the young woman by the young man's side, he worked hard to suppress the flames of rage in his heart and asked with a low voice. Do you need something? Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Elder Hu. As the saying goes, everything has a first come first served. Up until now, Xuanai and I have arrived here earlier than you. Now, we haven't even chosen, yet you want to choose? Elder Hu took a deep breath when he heard this. Then both of you choose first. When he thought of how terrifying the yellow-clothed young woman was. No matter how much he wanted to kill the violet-clothed young man before him, no matter how much he hated the violet-clothed young man for using his connections to intimidate others, he had no other way. The situation was stronger than the person. Xuanai. Duan Lingtian looked at Han Xuanai. Big brother Lingtian, you go in first. So as to avoid this old bastard playing any tricks. Han Xuanai's face bloomed into a smile when she looked at Duan Lingtian, whereas, when she inadvertently looked at Elder Hu, the smile on her face vanished and was replaced by a layer of frost. This caused Elder Hu to be unable to refrain from shivering. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded, and then his figure flashed out to directly enter the inscription formation that contained the final wind concept fragment. There were only 2 wind concept fragments. One of them was obtained by the little black snake. It was a 3rd level advanced concept fragment. I wonder what level this wind concept fragment left behind for me would be. Duan Lingtian was slightly anticipating it. As he stood before the small stone platform at the side of the stairway, Duan Lingtian's hand slowly stretched out towards the box on the small stone platform. Opening the box, an azure-colored fragment lay silently there. At this moment, Duan Lingtian's perturbed expression vanished without a trace, and it was replaced by pleasant surprise. A 5th level advanced wind concept fragment. Even though the wind concept fragment he chose was inferior to the lightning concept fragment the little gold mouse chose, it was still much stronger than the wind concept fragment the little black snake chose. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and put away the concept of wind fragment with some excitement. In the distance, Han Xuanai's eyes brightened when she saw the concept fragment in Duan Lingtian's hand. She hurriedly congratulated Duan Lingtian. "Congratulations, big brother Lingtian." Duan Lingtian responded with a smile, and then he put the concept fragment into his storage ring. "Xuanai, I'll head down first." Duan Lingtian greeted Xuanai before continuing to descend the flight of stairs. He headed to the 3rd level of the Sword Monarch's treasure, which was also the final level. He wasn't worried about Han Xuanai's safety. Not to mention the 3rd level had different tests set according to one's cultivation, just Xuanai's formidable strength wasn't something anyone could compare to. Duan Lingtian walked down the stairs, and an expanse of grey and hazy mist appeared before his eyes once more. He hadn't completely passed through the mist when Duan Lingtian felt a wave of scorching aura assault his face. It wouldn't be that inscription formation that condenses flames again, right? Duan Lingtian guessed in his heart. Only when Duan Lingtian completely walked out of the mist did he realize that he guessed wrongly. Presently, even though what appeared before his eyes was similarly a vast cavern, but there was a great deal of lava flowing within the cavern. This place was like the interior of a volcano, and it gave one an oppressive feeling. Of course, with Duan Lingtian's current cultivation, he was utterly unafraid of the lava before him. His gaze descended onto the 3-foot-long blades that were stuck all over the lava. These 3-foot-long blades were of various shapes and sizes, and they were scattered all over the cavern. When looked at from afar, this place seemed to be a sword tomb. A sword tomb was the place where swords were buried. These swords, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force swept out at the first possible moment to detect these swords before him. Whereas his calm expression revealed a wisp of shock. They're all swords that are grade 3 spirit weapons or above. Amongst them, there's no lack of grade 2 spirit swords. Duan Lingtian's mood surged. The 3-foot-long blades that were scattered all over the place shocked him. Even though he could be considered to be a grade 3 weapons craftsman now and was able to refine grade 3 spirit swords. But the materials to refine grade 3 spirit swords weren't so easy to find. It was even to the extent that he hadn't even found all the materials to refine a grade 3 spirit weapon cauldron that was comparatively simpler. Unknowingly, Duan Lingtian continued walking deeper in. He'd only taken a few steps when Duan Lingtian's vigilant spiritual force felt a wave of gentle fluctuation come from beneath his feet. He wasn't unfamiliar with this fluctuation. An inscription formation. Duan Lingtian's expression became serious. He knew that he'd activated an inscription formation. Whereas now, what he had to do was to deal with all the tests that the inscription formation brought about. But after waiting for a while, Duan Lingtian didn't notice anything wrong. What's going on? I can be sure that the fluctuation from before was indeed an inscription formation without a doubt. Duan Lingtian was slightly puzzled. Could it be that the inscription formation had decayed after a long period of time? Right when Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised and bewildered. Lucky Jr. This is the 3rd level of the cenotaph that I left behind. I can be sure that your cultivation is at the 3rd level of the void initiation stage, and the following tests will be carried out according to this cultivation. A sudden voice seemed to sweep over from all directions and entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. It's him. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted. He was able to discern it. This voice was exactly the same as the voice he heard from the voice transmission jade slips in the first and second levels of the Sword Monarch's treasure. It was the same person. Sword Monarch. Duan Lingtian understood that this was the voice that the Sword Monarch left behind. This inscription formation ought to be an inscription formation that combines the sound transmission inscription and various other inscriptions together, and it's capable of detecting the cultivation of others. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian guessed the effect of the inscription formation he activated earlier. It was none other than detecting his cultivation and warning him through the sound transmission inscription. Even though this inscription formation is ordinary, it isn't something that anyone can set up. It at least requires a spiritual force at the martial monarch stage or above. With the memories of Emperor Wu of Samsara, Duan Lingtian knew the various inscription formations in detail. The Sword Monarch's voice didn't stop and continued. The third level of my cenotaph has a total of 6 tests. Amongst them, 3 tests one's wisdom and aren't dangerous in the slightest, the other 3 tests one's strength, and the slightest mistake might cause one to die directly. After arriving at the third level of the cenotaph, there's no path of retreat. Unless one passes through the 3 tests of strength, otherwise, the path that leads to the exit won't appear. The voice continued to sound out, causing Duan Lingtian to feel even more pressured. Won't appear. Doesn't that mean that if I'm unable to pass through the 3 tests of strength, then I'll be left here forever? Of the 6 tests, the first, third, and 5th tests one's wisdom, the second, 4th, and 6th tests one's strength. The person that passes all the tests first will obtain my inheritance. The voice sounded out once more, and it caused Duan Lingtian's eyes to be unable to help but light up. Inheritance? At this instant, Duan Lingtian felt his breathing become hurried. Never had he imagined that this Sword Monarch's treasure was actually set up by the martial monarch for the sake of his inheritance. He originally thought that it was only a small game of the martial monarch, and there weren't any precious treasures within. But now it would seem that he was wrong, extremely wrong. Wait. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian thought of something. That martial monarch kept saying that this is his cenotaph. Isn't a cenotaph a place where the belongings of the dead are stored? Could it be that the martial monarch left behind a cenotaph before his death? When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's heartbeat became even faster, and his chest rose and fell like a bellows, and he was unable to calm down for a long time. Something left behind by a martial monarch before his death. Would it be something simple? Perhaps everything that the martial monarch left behind throughout his lifetime is here. But even though the rewards of the third level are numerous, they're divided into 10 portions. If I want to obtain the best reward, then I must be the first to pass through the 6 great tests set up by the martial monarch. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's mood calmed down. He knew that he had to rely on himself for everything that followed. Now, he was all alone. But according to the message left behind by the martial monarch, the tests of the third level were set up according to my cultivation. I presume that besides the 3 tests of wisdom, I'll be able to deal with the other 3 tests of strength. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Now, I'll begin the first test. Duan Lingtian knew that every moment and second was extremely precious now, and he had to pass through all the tests in the shortest amount of time. Only in this way would he be able to obtain the inheritance of the martial monarch. Would the inheritance left behind by the martial monarch be something simple? Duan Lingtian didn't think so. Perhaps, the martial monarch passed away here. If it's like this, then perhaps there's a profundity fragment within his skull. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's mood that had calmed down surged once more. Profundity fragment. It contained the martial monarch's comprehension towards profundity. On the other hand, profundity was an existence that stood above concept. Even the lowest level of profundity, first level profundity, contained 2 times the strength of 9th level advanced concept. 9th level advanced concept was comparable to the strength of 1,000 ancient horned dragons. First level profundity was comparable to the strength of 2,000 ancient horned dragons. 9th level profundity was even comparable to the strength of 10,000 ancient horned dragons. At that time, the 10,000 ancient horned dragon silhouettes condensed from the energy of the heavens and the earth would undergo a transformation and transform into a completely new phenomenon of the heavens and the earth. But even if I obtain a profundity fragment, I'm temporarily unable to use it. A profundity fragment stands above a concept fragment, and only someone that has comprehended 9th level advanced concept and profundity is able to comprehend profundity from it. Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief. For example, if a wind profundity fragment appeared within the remains of the martial monarch. Chapter 6:16. Currently, even if Duan Lingtian obtained the wind profundity fragment, he could only temporarily keep it as a backup. But even if I can't use it for now, it's not bad to keep it as a backup. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Profundity fragment. Even if it's the great treasure that Emperor Wu prepared for his 3rd lifetime during his 2nd lifetime, there seems to only be 3. Profundity fragments were usually only martial monarchs that were able to nurture them. Moreover, there weren't many martial monarchs on Cloud Continent, and there were absolutely no more than 100 living martial monarchs. In such a large Cloud Continent, there were no more than 100 martial monarchs, so the preciousness of a profundity fragment was obvious. Moreover, a martial monarch stage expert only needed a single thought to detonate a profundity fragment. So even if someone was able to kill a martial monarch stage expert, the person would most likely be unable to obtain the martial monarch stage expert's profundity fragment. Presently, practically all the profundity fragments on Cloud Continent were left behind by martial monarchs after they passed away. There were very few profundity fragments obtained from killing martial monarchs. The preciousness of a profundity fragment was obvious. What's the first test of wisdom? Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be slightly stunned when he noticed that the martial monarch's voice didn't move any longer. Let's continue forward and take a look. After waiting for a while without any movement, Duan Lingtian continued forward. In next to no time, a familiar fluctuation spread out beneath Duan Lingtian's feet, and it was precisely another inscription formation that had been activated. It's coming. Duan Lingtian's heart constricted, and he couldn't help but become vigilant. Right at this moment, the martial monarch's voice sounded out once more, and this time it seemed to be cold and indifferent, and it didn't contain the slightest emotion. The first test of wisdom. Find the one and only grade 1 spirit sword in the sword tomb and pull it out. If you choose wrongly and fail the test, no matter if you succeed or fail, the sword you pull out will be the reward you obtained in the first test. The remaining swords will be buried underground and never see the light of day again. The martial monarch's voice stopped abruptly here. Grade 1 spirit sword. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted, and he started to look around the surroundings. He knew clearly in his heart that the sword tomb mentioned by the martial monarch was probably referring to this cave filled with lava and swords. However, there was actually a grade 1 spirit sword among these swords. Grade 1 spirit sword, even if the level of the weapon craftsman who refined the grade 1 spirit sword was mediocre, it was still a grade 1 spirit weapon after all. The amplification would be at least 87%. An increase of 87%, what sort of concept was that? Even the grade 4 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand that he refined himself only provided a 60% amplification. However, the difficulty of finding the only grade 1 spirit sword among so many spirit swords is really not small. There are at least over 100 swords here, and grade 3 spirit swords occupy almost 90% of them, and grade 2 spirit swords only occupy 10%. Unless it's a high-grade weapon craftsman with unique experience. Otherwise, it's very difficult to distinguish what's different about these spirit swords. Duan Lingtian's gaze casually swept past these spirit swords. Even if he used his spiritual force to investigate and coupled with the experience he'd inherited from Emperor Wu of Samsara, he wasn't able to notice which sword was a grade 1 spirit sword. Let alone the others. If the others were to encounter this test, they would at most obtain a grade 3 spirit sword. However, even if it's only a grade 3 spirit sword, it can already be considered as a precious treasure to martial artists that haven't walked out of the foreign lands. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. If I'm unable to find a grade 1 spirit sword, then even if I'm able to obtain a grade 2 spirit sword or a grade 3 spirit sword, I'll still be considered to have failed the test. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath before walking out and starting to carefully size up the surroundings. After looking for a long time, Duan Lingtian confirmed it. There was a total of 103 spirit swords here. Amongst them, 90 were grade 3 spirit swords, and the other 13 were grade 2 spirit swords. What's going on? Isn't there a grade 1 spirit sword? Duan Lingtian was dumbfounded. Even if he wanted to scam someone, he shouldn't do it like this, right? Duan Lingtian shook his head and carefully sized up the 103 spirit swords before him again. In the end, he still came up empty-handed. I'm sure there's no grade 1 spirit sword among the 103 spirit swords here. Duan Lingtian was extremely certain. What a joke. Although he was only a grade 3 weapons craftsman now, he had the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu in his mind. His judgment was no different from Samsara Emperor Wu's. When Samsara Emperor Wu was at his peak, he was a royal grade weapons craftsman that surpassed grade 1 weapons craftsman and quasi-royal grade weapons craftsman. Even if a grade 1 spirit weapon was placed in front of Samsara Emperor Wu would not even spare it a glance. Perhaps, in the eyes of Samsara Emperor Wu, a grade 1 spirit weapon was no different from trash. That martial monarch isn't playing with me, right? Duan Lingtian frowned. With a quick thought, Duan Lingtian dispelled this thought. Since that martial monarch set up such a test, he would presumably not do it for no reason. Perhaps that grade 1 spirit sword is hidden somewhere else. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's attention no longer revolved around the 103 spirit swords that were inserted into the ground, and he sized up the surroundings of the cavern instead. This cavern couldn't be considered to be large when compared to the first and second levels of the Sword Monarch's treasure. After casually taking a few steps, everything within the cavern appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. In this cavern that was covered in lava, besides the 103 spirit swords that were inserted into the ground, there was also a pile of scrap metal that was scattered around the cavern. These pieces of scrap metal were mostly sword embryos and the like. The martial monarch that left behind the Sword Monarch's treasure wouldn't be a weapons craftsman as well, right? Duan Lingtian guessed in his heart. Besides the 103 spirit swords that are inserted into the ground, the remaining are all scrap metal. Now, I can confirm that there isn't a grade 1 spirit sword amongst the 103 spirit swords. Could it be that the grade 1 spirit sword is hidden within this pile of scrap metal? When he thought up to here, the thoughts in Duan Lingtian's heart grew even stronger. Search, search, search. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian started searching carefully within the scrap metal. In the end, he really did notice an inkling. Swish! With a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian pushed the pile of scrap metal to the side. At the same time, a simple and unadorned sword embryo appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. At this moment, it was a sword embryo that had yet to undergo the final step of weapon refinement, and it was extremely ugly and black. However, the sword embryo had a sword hilt and a sword blade, so it could be used as a sword, but it was only slightly ugly. At this moment, a part of this ugly sword embryo was inserted into the cavern wall. If it wasn't for the fact that I have the memories of the royal grade weapons craftsman, Emperor Wu of Samsara, I'm afraid I would have failed this test of wisdom. Who would have thought that a black sword embryo that was hidden within a piece of scrap metal would actually be a grade 1 spirit sword? Looking at the extremely ugly sword embryo before him, Duan Lingtian had a wry smile on his face. After confirming that this sword embryo was a grade 1 spirit sword, Duan Lingtian did not hesitate and raised his hand to grab the sword hilt, preparing to pull it out. Just when Duan Lingtian's hand touched the sword hilt, whoosh! A strong light suddenly flashed before Duan Lingtian's eyes, causing him to be unable to help but close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed that the remaining 103 spirit swords and the surrounding scrap metal had vanished into thin air within this cavern that was filled with lava. Only the ugly sword embryo in his hand was left in the entire cavern. Congratulations, you've passed the first test of wisdom and obtained a grade 1 spirit sword. At the same time, Duan Lingtian heard a voice that sounded out from the ugly sword embryo in his hand. The sound condensing inscription left behind by that martial monarch is really everywhere. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled as he pulled out the sword embryo. The sound condensing inscription was similar to a sound condensing jade slip, and it could be used as a medium to leave a message. The latter required origin energy to be activated. The former only required someone to touch it before it could be activated by itself. This grade 1 spiritual sword is truly a little ugly. Looking at the ugly sword embryo in his hand, Duan Lingtian shook his head and laughed bitterly. I wonder to what extent the amplification of such an ugly grade 1 spirit sword is. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he released the origin energy in his hand and pressed it into the extremely ugly sword embryo, intending to test its amplification. Whoosh! In practically an instant, the energy of heaven and earth above Duan Lingtian roiled before developing into numerous ancient horned dragon and ancient mammoth silhouettes in the end. There were a total of 7 ancient horned dragon silhouettes. There were an entire 5,200 ancient mammoth silhouettes. I'm currently at the 3rd level of the Void Initiation stage, and without using a spirit weapon or concept, my strength is comparable to the strength of 4 ancient horned dragons. In other words, the amplification is the strength of 3 ancient horned dragons plus the strength of 5,200 ancient mammoths. Duan Lingtian pondered briefly before confirming in the end. This grade 1 spirit sword is able to amplify strength by 88%. It can be considered to be not bad amongst grade 1 spirit weapons. Duan Lingtian looked at the sword embryo and nodded, then laughed bitterly. But, this sword is truly too ugly. I'm really embarrassed to take it out in front of others. Up until now, Duan Lingtian was still unable to let go of the appearance of this grade 1 spirit sword. After returning to his senses, Duan Lingtian held the grade 1 spirit sword tightly in his hand. According to the message left behind by the martial monarch earlier, the second test would be a test of strength. Even though Duan Lingtian didn't know exactly what the next test of strength would be, it was undoubtedly a test that would test his strength. Presently, as he held the grade 1 spirit sword, Duan Lingtian felt his confidence increase greatly. Presently, I'm able to exert the strength of 7 ancient horned dragons and over 5,000 ancient mammoths by relying on the grade 1 spirit sword. If I utilize 2nd level wind concept, advanced lightning force, and elementary earth force, I'll gain the strength of 2 ancient horned dragons and over 2,000 ancient mammoths. Added together, it's the strength of 9 ancient horned dragons and over 7,000 ancient mammoths. Almost the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons. Needless to say, the origin shadow puppets were truly too skilled. Precisely speaking, it was the origin shadow puppets that appeared around Duan Lingtian now that were too exquisite. Every sword strike of Duan Lingtian only destroyed 1 origin shadow puppet. The other origin shadow puppets were always able to dodge in time. This won't do. This won't do. Every sword strike of mine only kills 1 origin shadow puppet. How many sword strikes do I have to execute in order to kill 100 origin shadow puppets? When he thought of how he only had 15 minutes, Duan Lingtian was extremely anxious. Let me see how all of you dodge in that way. Lightning flashed, Duan Lingtian's gaze lit up as he thought of a method, and the violet clothes on his body fluttered without the wind. Whirlwind. Instantly, Duan Lingtian's entire body seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that swept towards a corner of the cavern. He floated in midair with his back against the wall, and he stared at the group of origin shadow puppets from afar. Whereas the group of origin shadow puppets once again charged towards Duan Lingtian. But, because Duan Lingtian's back was against the wall, the space they were in was forcefully compressed by 2 times, and the group of origin shadow puppets gathered together in a dense group. When he saw the group of origin shadow puppets pouncing over, Duan Lingtian tightly leaned against the corner of the wall, and the spirit sword in his hand swept out horizontally. A strength that was close to the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons gushed out. Swish! 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 With a raise of Duan Lingtian's hand, numerous sword lights swept out, seeming to have formed a sword net that enveloped the group of origin shadow puppets. It was like a heaven-encompassing net that firmly trapped them within. The group of origin shadow puppets fled in all directions when they saw Duan Lingtian's sword light descending. But unfortunately, because Duan Lingtian's back was against the corner of the wall, the area they could flee to was extremely narrow. In the blink of an eye, over 10 origin shadow puppets had been annihilated under Duan Lingtian's sword. Satisfying. When this sword strike descended, Duan Lingtian only felt the stuffiness in his chest vanish without a trace, and he felt elated. Along with Duan Lingtian withdrawing his hand, the remaining origin shadow puppets once again pounced towards Duan Lingtian. Although they knew how to dodge at a critical moment, they didn't have the emotions of a human and didn't know fear, so they still instinctively attacked Duan Lingtian. And the outcome could be imagined. Although the origin shadow puppets were numerous, they were unable to withstand the slaughter of Duan Lingtian, who was leaning against the corner of the wall. In less than 15 minutes, 100 origin shadow puppets had been annihilated. Right at this moment. Whoosh! Within the cavern, a gust of strange wind suddenly arose, and then dust suffused the air. Where's the wind coming from? Duan Lingtian looked over curiously. Only now did he notice that at the other corner of the cavern, at the place where dust was emitted, there was an exquisite box. That's the reward of the second test. Duan Lingtian's gaze lit up, and he flew out to descend at the side of the box. Subsequently, he impatiently opened the box. Within the box, a crystalline and translucent pearl silently lay there. Soul Pearl. With a single glance, Duan Lingtian recognized this pearl. It was precisely the soul pearl he'd obtained once before. At that time, after his spiritual force fused with the soul pearl, it underwent a change. It advanced to the point of being 2 levels higher than his cultivation. Now, his cultivation was at the 3rd level of the void initiation stage, whereas, his spiritual force had advanced to the 5th level of the void initiation stage because of fusing with the soul pearl that day. It was still 2 levels higher than his cultivation. I wonder if my spiritual force will be able to advance another step after fusing with this soul pearl. Duan Lingtian didn't think and impatiently picked up the soul pearl. Right when he intended to fuse his spiritual force into it, a voice sounded out from within the soul pearl. Congratulations on passing the second test. Next, the third test is a test of wisdom. Walk 5 steps backward and 3 steps to the right to activate the third test. It was another message from the martial monarch. The voice transmission inscription was precisely within the soul pearl. Inscribing a voice transmission inscription within the soul pearl. Looks like that martial monarch's attainments in the Tao of inscriptions isn't shallow. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. After returning to his senses, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force fused into the soul pearl and directly absorbed the pure spiritual force within the soul pearl. After a short moment, Duan Lingtian was able to feel his spiritual force transforming. But the transformation was extremely small. In the end, his spiritual force wasn't even able to break through to the 6th level of the void initiation stage. Soul pearls had better effects when used when one's spiritual force was weak. Perhaps, with another 2 or 3 soul pearls, my spiritual force would be able to transform a step further. What a pity. Duan Lingtian sighed. With a quick thought, Duan Lingtian came to an understanding. Being able to obtain a soul pearl can already be considered to be my luck. I was still too greedy. Duan Lingtian stood up and walked towards the place the martial monarch left behind to activate the third test. The inscription formation arrived as scheduled. The third test is a test of wisdom. Find a secret compartment within the cavern and obtain the thing within the secret compartment. The martial monarch's voice sounded out woodenly. The time limit is 15 minutes. If you haven't found the secret compartment after 15 minutes, then you've failed the test. Find the secret compartment and obtain the thing within it, and that thing will be your reward for passing the third test. Along with the martial monarch's voice vanishing, Duan Lingtian hurriedly flashed towards the corner closest to him in the cavern and carefully sized it up. At the same time, his spiritual force stretched out and didn't miss a single place. He used his spiritual force to sense clues that were unable to be noticed by the naked eye. Duan Lingtian was extremely confident towards his spiritual force. 15 minutes of time. It's sufficient for me to use my spiritual force to search every single corner of the cavern. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief. If he wasn't an inscription master and didn't possess spiritual force, then he would only use his naked eye to search for the secret compartment the martial monarch spoke of, or use some other method to search for the secret compartment. It was extremely difficult for him to pass through this test in 15 minutes. This test feels as if it's tailor-made for inscription masters. At this moment, Duan Lingtian even had such a misconception. Starting from the corner of the cavern, Duan Lingtian carefully searched for the secret compartment the martial monarch spoke of, his gaze sizing it up from top to bottom, and his spiritual force was all-pervasive. Time silently flowed by. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian seemed as if he didn't know exhaustion, and he seriously searched every single corner of the cavern. Finally, when half of the 15 minutes had passed, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force detected a place that was extremely strange. This place, Duan Lingtian's figure that floated in midair flashed and descended before a cavern wall, and he squatted down and sized up the flat cavern wall before him. If he only used his naked eye to look at it, he would utterly be unable to notice anything wrong with this cavern wall. Slap! Duan Lingtian raised his hand and slapped out with his palm, and his origin energy entered into it. Bang! An enormous bang sounded out, and the cavern wall shook for a moment before splitting into pieces, yet it still didn't reveal anything. If it was another person, perhaps the person would leave and search elsewhere because of this. After all, one wouldn't be able to discern any clues just from looking at the split cavern wall. But Duan Lingtian didn't leave. He really hid it well. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled, the origin energy in his hand condensed into form and transformed into a short sword that pierced into the split cavern wall and tore open the crack. Chapter 618. Bang! Instantly, the rock on the cavern wall was pulled down by Duan Lingtian. At the same time, an inconspicuous secret compartment appeared before his eyes. I've finally found it. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth held a smile as he pulled out the secret compartment with a raise of his hand. There was a spatial ring lying quietly in the secret compartment. There's no spatial ring that possesses ownership. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up, and then he picked up the spatial ring. Looks like the reward of the third test is within this spatial ring. At practically the instant that Duan Lingtian picked up the spatial ring. Congratulations on passing the third test. The fourth test, walk 5 steps to the right, then another 7 steps to the right to open it. A clear voice sounded out from the spatial ring. It was precisely the voice that came from the sound transmission inscription that the martial monarch left behind in the spatial ring. I'll claim ownership of the spatial ring first and see if there's anything good within it. Duan Lingtian pinched open his finger and a drop of blood entered the spatial ring. In the blink of an eye, the storage ring became his. With a thought, the space within the spatial ring appeared within his mind. What a large space! This spatial ring is probably a grade 1 spirit weapon spatial ring without a doubt. Spatial rings were divided into grades as well. Grade 7 spirit weapon spatial rings belonged to the lowest grade of spatial rings. The higher the grade of the spatial ring, the larger the storage space within it. For example, the spatial ring in Duan Lingtian's hand was a grade 1 spirit weapon, and the space within it was even larger than the cavern he was in now. But, even though the space was large, it was empty. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian was attracted by a pile of milky white stones at the corner. These stones lay there silently, and a portion of them even emitted a faint white glow. Especially one of them, one could faintly see a white glow coiling around it. Origin stones. With a single glance, Duan Lingtian recognized the origin of the stone. Origin stones, the medium of wealth of foreign lands martial artists. In the foreign lands, there were similarly many transactions between martial artists. Besides private transactions, so long as it was in the foreign lands, those inns and restaurants practically didn't accept gold or silver. Only origin stones were accepted. Origin stones were a common currency in the foreign lands, and they were also a medium for martial artists to cultivate. They could help martial artists improve their cultivation rapidly. When I just entered the Sword Monarch's treasure, I was still muttering that if I was able to obtain origin stones within the Sword Monarch's treasure, then I would have profited greatly. I never imagined that origin stones would really appear. Looking at the pile of primordial stones in front of him, Duan Lingtian could not help but exclaim. However, Duan Lingtian's face quickly fell. Are you kidding me? Only one upper-grade primordial stone. 100 mid-grade primordial stones and 10,000 low-grade primordial stones. Was this the wealth left behind by a martial emperor? That's too stingy. After counting the number of primordial stones in the pile, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but curse. Such wealth would be considered wealthy in the hands of an ordinary emptiness realm martial artist. However, in the hands of a martial monarch, it was nothing. As someone who had fused with the memories of Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian was naturally very knowledgeable in this regard. Never mind, it's better than nothing, Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief as he recovered his mood. To him, this pile of primordial stones was something he obtained by chance, and it was better than nothing. If these mid-grade primordial stones and low-grade primordial stones are converted into high-grade primordial stones, then it's only 2 in total. But, 3 high-grade primordial stones are sufficient for me to cultivate for a period of time. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Primordial stones were divided into grades as well. The spirit energy contained within a single high-grade primordial stone was comparable to the spirit energy contained within 100 mid-grade primordial stones, and was comparable to the spirit energy contained within 10,000 low-grade primordial stones. With my current cultivation, even if I only use low-grade primordial stones to cultivate, a single low-grade primordial stone is more or less able to cultivate for an hour. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he wore the spatial ring on his hand before standing up and intending to activate the 4th test. The 3rd test from before was a test of wisdom. Now, the 4th test was undoubtedly a test of strength. I wonder what test of strength it will be. At the same time that Duan Lingtian walked out, an extremely ugly sword base appeared in his hand. It was precisely the reward he obtained from the first test of wisdom, a grade 1 spirit sword. The grade 1 spirit sword in his hand gave Duan Lingtian an extremely great sense of security. Walk 5 steps to the right, then 7 steps to the right. Duan Lingtian followed the message left behind by the martial monarch and walked with large strides towards the place where the 4th test of strength would be activated. He walked over slowly step by step. When his foot descended onto the final step, another wave of the fluctuation of an inscription formation swept out beneath his feet. An exceedingly clear voice entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. The fourth test of strength is called a test of strength. Defeat the 4th level Void Initiation Stage Earth Puppet that's capable of executing 4th level Elementary Earth Concept. The reward is the Earth Concept fragment in the Earth Puppet's possession. The Martial Monarch's message stopped abruptly at this point. Earth Puppet. 4th level Elementary Earth Concept. 4th level Void Initiation Stage. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted, and he couldn't help but search through the memories of the Samsara Emperor Wu with the intention of wanting to know what the Earth Puppet was. In next to no time, he obtained an answer. The Earth Puppet was a type of Origin Shadow Puppet condensed from an inscription formation, and it was a strengthened version of the Origin Shadow Puppet. The Earth Puppet was condensed from an Origin Shadow Puppet combined with the energy of the Earth, and it possessed a material body that was completely hard like a rock. Normally speaking, the Earth Puppet similarly doesn't know how to execute concept. But that martial monarch planted an Earth Concept fragment into the body of the Earth Puppet, allowing it to execute Earth Concept to a certain extent. When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian gasped. Rumble. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian felt the ground beneath his feet shake. He raised his head to look over, and only now did he notice that the ground in the distance was shaking as strands of earthen yellow-colored energy of the earth surged out and spread out in the sky. At the same time, a human-shaped figure appeared out of thin air in the sky above the energy of the earth. It was precisely an Origin Shadow Puppet. Subsequently, the energy of the earth poured into the Origin Shadow Puppet, causing the body of the Origin Shadow Puppet to ceaselessly condense, and it seemed as if it had transformed into a material person. Of course, it was impossible for it to be an ordinary person. Presently, the Origin Shadow Puppet had transformed into an earth puppet with an earthen yellow-colored body, and the energy of the earth on its body had condensed into firm rocks that formed a formidable defense. Bang! Right at this moment, the ground shattered into pieces. Cracks that were like spiderwebs stretched out in all directions. Subsequently, swish! An earthen yellow-colored flowing light instantly fused into the body of the earth puppet. Instantly, the eyes of the earth puppet that were originally dim and lusterless suddenly flickered with strands of earthen yellow-colored bright lights, and it caused one to feel a chill run down one's spine. 4th level Elementary Earth Concept coupled with a cultivation at the 4th level of the Void Initiation Stage. Even if he doesn't possess a spirit weapon, he's still capable of exerting the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons. It surpasses my full strength. Duan Lingtian felt pressured. Moreover, this is a cavern that's connected to the ground, and he's able to draw support from the energy of the earth. The cavern is too small, and I'm utterly unable to avoid the earth. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. 4th level Elementary Earth Concept was comparable to the strength of 4 ancient horned dragons. With such an Earth Concept, mobilizing the energy of the Earth was at least capable of mobilizing the strength of another 2 ancient horned dragons. In other words, if the Earth Puppet exerted its full strength, it was extremely likely that it possessed the strength of 12 ancient horned dragons. For a time, Duan Lingtian felt his breathing almost stop. Unknowingly, the hand that held the Grade 1 Spirit Sword was already drenched in sweat. That martial monarch is really a cheat. I'm only at the 3rd level of the Void Initiation Stage, yet he asked me to deal with a monster like this. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but curse the martial monarch that left behind the Sword Monarch's treasure. He could imagine. If that martial monarch heard Duan Lingtian's curses in his heart, perhaps he would be enraged to the point of directly kicking Duan Lingtian out of the Sword Monarch's treasure, and not allow Duan Lingtian to encroach on his possessions. Swoosh! The earth puppet moved, and it stomped on the ground to arrive before Duan Lingtian in the blink of an eye. The earth puppet raised its hand and punched out with origin energy that skyrocketed, and it was accompanied by a wave of ear-piercing sounds of air exploding as it blasted towards Duan Lingtian. The origin energy was suffused with a deep earthen yellow-colored energy. Earth Concept. Instantly, 10 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared in the sky above the earth puppet, and they flashed over with an imposing manner that shot into the sky like rainbows. It seemed as if they would only stop after completely suppressing Duan Lingtian. Whirlwind. Duan Lingtian didn't dare dally, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a gust of wind that barely dodged the earth puppet's punch. After Duan Lingtian dodged it, the earth puppet's punch didn't lose momentum in the slightest as it blasted onto the cavern wall. Bang! Instantly, cracks that were like spiderwebs appeared on the cavern wall, and the entire cavern shook as if an extremely strong earthquake had occurred. As for Duan Lingtian, he instead stood in the sky and wasn't affected. Sword drawing arts. When he saw the earth puppet's back descend before his eyes, Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold, and origin energy condensed on the grade 1 spirit sword in his hand as he suddenly attacked. Swish! His sword was like a bolt of lightning, and before the earth puppet had even turned around, Duan Lingtian's spirit sword had already touched the earth puppet's body. Clang! A wave of clear sounds sounded out, and it caused Duan Lingtian, who originally thought he would be able to defeat the earth puppet because of this, to be completely dumbstruck. The memories of Samsara Emperor Wu flashed within his mind, and Duan Lingtian's face flushed red, and he couldn't help but curse. F***K. You don't have to play like this, right? According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. Because the earth puppet was formed from the energy of the earth and origin shadow puppets, besides possessing a formidable strength, it also possessed an extremely terrifying defensive strength. If the strength of the attack didn't exceed its own strength, then it was utterly unable to harm it in the slightest. In other words, I at least have to possess the strength of over 10 ancient horned dragons before I can defeat it. This is still before it mobilizes the energy of the earth. If it mobilizes the energy of the earth, then wouldn't I have to possess the strength of over 12 ancient horned dragons before I can defeat it? Chapter 6:19. Duan Lingtian's sword strike had failed, and he could only temporarily dodge the earth puppet's edge. But the earth puppet had a speed that steadily surpassed Duan Lingtian, and when it charged towards Duan Lingtian, it was like an eagle catching a chick. After a short moment, the earth puppet had once again arrived before Duan Lingtian. Its fist smashed out once more, and it contained the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons with an imposing manner that shot into the sky like a rainbow. This time, Duan Lingtian wasn't able to dodge in time, and in a hurry, the grade 1 spirit sword in his hand shook as it moved to intercept the earth puppet's fist. Bang! The earth puppet's fist smashed down, shaking Duan Lingtian's hand that held the sword to the point. The palm between his thumb and index finger split open and dripped with fresh blood. The grade 1 spirit sword had almost slipped out of his hand as well. The earth puppet's fist was pressed slightly by the strength of the grade 1 spirit sword in the end, and it avoided Duan Lingtian before fiercely smashing out. The material fist print whistled out and smashed onto the ground as if it was crushing dry weeds. Instantly, the ground quaked and the mountain swayed once more. I can't go on like this. I'll be killed by it sooner or later. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and used his origin energy to stop his bleeding, then he consumed a great recovery pill before catching his breath and retreating to the other side of the cavern. I can only try if soul skills are effective against it, Duan Lingtian commanded in his mind, and a dim light flickered within his eyes. 1,000 illusions. Instantly, Duan Lingtian constructed an illusory space that enveloped the earth puppet. However, it was completely disregarded by the earth puppet. Looks like even though the earth puppet possesses a material body, its essence is still an origin shadow puppet. It doesn't have a soul and is utterly unaffected by soul skills. Duan Lingtian sighed in his heart. At this moment, he realized that even though he'd grasped the soul skill, 1,000 illusions, it was useless before the earth puppet. Meanwhile, the earth puppet continued charging towards Duan Lingtian and unfolded the process of an eagle catching a chick. Swoosh! 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 The earth golem's speed completely surpassed the Duan Ling Tian, its strength completely surpassed the Duan Ling Tian, and its battle with the Duan Ling Tian was simply like an adult chasing after a child. Why hasn't it mobilized the earth energy with the earth concept yet? Duan Ling Tian was puzzled by this. He believed that if the earth puppet mobilized the energy of the earth, then he would probably be killed by the earth puppet in a single move. Duan Ling Tian, who had dodged many times and suffered many injuries, came to a conclusion while being beaten. For some reason, the earth golem couldn't draw upon the power of the earth. What's going on? Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but feel curious as he hurriedly fled under the pursuit of the earth golem. With a thought, he began to search Emperor Wu's memories. Soon, he got his answer. Even if an earth golem were to forcefully fuse with an earth concept fragment, it would still be unable to compare to a human that has comprehended the earth concept. Demon beasts usually mobilize the energy of the earth. Human martial artists or demon beasts can only communicate with the earth through the earth concept and attain a level of intimacy before being able to obtain the acknowledgement of the earth and mobilize the energy of the earth. Whereas the earth puppet doesn't possess intelligence. Its stiff and icy cold body utterly doesn't know how to communicate with the earth through the earth concept. In this way, it's naturally unable to mobilize the energy of the earth. Duan Ling Tian heaved a sigh of relief. So that's how it is. Although the current earth puppet was still not something that Duan Ling Tian could deal with. But the worry in Duan Ling Tian's heart still dispersed greatly. At the very least, he was now completely sure that when the earth puppet exerted its full strength, it was only comparable to the strength of 10 ancient horned dragons. Compared to him, it was only stronger by the strength of a few thousand ancient mammoths. Whoosh! A wave of ear-piercing howls of the wind sounded out, causing Duan Ling Tian's mind to instantly tense. He knew that the earth puppet had approached him again. Whirlwind! He hurriedly swung his sword backwards, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a gale that flashed towards the distance. Clang! After the earth puppet's fist that was like a cannonball blasted the grade 1 spirit sword in Duan Ling Tian's hand away once more, its momentum didn't reduce in the slightest as it blasted onto the cavern wall at the side with a bang, shaking the cavern wall to the point stone fragments flew into the air, and hideous and terrifying cracks appeared on the wall. It really hurts. Duan Ling Tian felt the intense pain that came from the web between his thumb and index finger, and he couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth as he frowned. Whoosh! Right at this moment, under Duan Ling Tian's gaze, the earth puppet turned around and charged towards him. The body of this earth puppet seems to be heavy, yet its speed isn't slow. Duan Ling Tian's gaze inadvertently descended onto the feet of the earth puppet. Presently, the earth puppet had flashed out to pounce towards Duan Ling Tian, and its feet rubbed against the ground and flickered with numerous sparks that were like bolts of lightning. These strands of sparks were imprinted within Duan Ling Tian's eyes and infinitely enlarged, causing Duan Ling Tian's expression to become slightly dumbstruck. Lightning! Lightning, Duan Ling Tian muttered, and he seemed to have obtained some sort of comprehension. It seemed as if an instant had passed, yet also seemed as if a century had passed. I understand now. So it turns out that I've taken a wrong path in the past. It's true that lightning belongs to the energy of nature, but it's formed through a certain method as well. That method is similar to friction. Duan Ling Tian returned to his senses. Right at this moment, the earth puppet had already arrived before Duan Ling Tian, and its fist was ceaselessly enlarging before Duan Ling Tian's eyes. It seemed as if it would smash Duan Ling Tian flying in the blink of an eye. Bring it on! Duan Ling Tian shouted out explosively, and he even didn't have the thought of dodging. Sword drawing arts. In the time it took for a bolt of lightning to flash out, the grade 1 spirit sword in Duan Ling Tian's hand flashed out like a shadow, and it moved to intercept the fist of the earth puppet that smashed towards him. In practically an instant, the origin energy and second-level wind concept within Duan Lingtian's body easily fused into the spirit sword. It wasn't just that. Strands of lightning flashed out along with it. Whoosh! In the sky above Duan Lingtian, another ancient horned dragon silhouette appeared out of thin air beside the 9 ancient horned dragon silhouettes and a few thousand ancient mammoth silhouettes. Lightning concept. First level elementary lightning concept. Swish! An ear-piercing sword howl sounded out, and when the grade 1 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand touched the fist of the earth puppet once more, it wasn't blasted away. Instead, it slashed the fist of the earth puppet off like cutting tofu. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's body moved slightly. The sound of wind and thunder resounded. He easily dodged the fist of the earth puppet that was brought out by inertia after being cut off. Bang! The fist that left the body of the earth puppet fiercely smashed onto the wall behind it, and it actually directly embedded itself into the wall. Cracks extended out in the surroundings of the fist, and it seemed to have formed a spider web. On the other hand, Duan Lingtian. Swish! 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 With a raise of his hand, the sword lights in Duan Lingtian's hand seemed to have transformed into a rain that covered the sky, and it descended bit by bit onto the body of the earth puppet. At this moment, the body of the earth puppet that Duan Lingtian was originally unable to injure in the slightest seemed to have become exceedingly weak tofu, and it was easily shattered into over 100 pieces by Duan Lingtian. Bang! 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 The remnants of the earth puppet fell to the ground successively, and they were numerous solid earthen yellow rocks. At the same time, an earthen yellow fragment appeared within Duan Lingtian's field of vision, and it fell along with the numerous earthen yellow rocks. Duan Lingtian's heart shook when he saw this earthen yellow fragment, and his gaze abruptly lit up. 7th level Advanced Earth Concept Fragment. This concept fragment was even better than the 6th level Advanced Lightning Concept Fragment that Little Gold obtained earlier. Duan Lingtian moved like a bolt of lightning to grab the Earth Concept Fragment in his hand, and his mood surged. Right at this moment, the voice of the martial monarch sounded out from the Earth Concept Fragment and entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. Congratulations on passing the 4th test. The 5th test is activated by walking 9 steps backward and 3 steps to the left. Obviously, the sound condensing inscription left behind by the martial monarch was within the Earth Concept Fragment. After returning to his senses, Duan Lingtian carefully sized up the concept fragment in his hand for a while. After confirming that he wasn't dreaming, he put it away in his spatial ring as if he'd obtained a precious treasure. This time, it was all thanks to this earth puppet that I was able to comprehend lightning concept in a hurry. Duan Lingtian sighed with emotion as he looked at the earth puppet that had shattered into over 100 pieces beneath his feet. He could imagine. If it wasn't for him comprehending lightning concept in time, it would be impossible for him to destroy the earth puppet and obtain the earth concept fragment. There are still 2 more tests. After returning to his senses, Duan Lingtian continued towards the 5th test. The 5th test was the test of wisdom. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian arrived at the place the martial monarch spoke of and activated the inscription formation. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian's vision blurred, and everything in his surroundings underwent a tremendous change. This place wasn't that cavern any longer. Instead, it was a dazzling palace. Illusory space. At the first possible moment, this thought abruptly emerged within Duan Lingtian's heart. After this thought arose, it couldn't be stopped, and it caused Duan Lingtian to be even more convinced. Duan Lingtian wasn't unfamiliar with illusory spaces. The sole skill he possessed, 1,000 illusions, was capable of constructing an illusory space that caused one to be immersed within and be unable to extricate themselves. I never imagined that there would be a time when I'd be trapped in an illusory space. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Right at this moment, the voice of the martial monarch sounded out in a timely manner. The fifth test is the test of wisdom. What you have to do is leave the palace you're in and return to the cavern. The time limit is 15 minutes. So long as you're able to return to the cavern within the time limit, the sixth test will begin instantly. So long as you defeat the final sword puppet, you'll be able to obtain my lifetime inheritance. Hearing the words of the martial monarch, Duan Lingtian was stunned. Obtain the inheritance? Could it be that the others have failed the previous tests? Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Although he didn't know exactly what was going on, Duan Lingtian still quickly recovered from his shock, and he raised his spirits to size up the illusory space before him. Although I'm able to construct an illusory space, but how should I break through this illusory space? Duan Lingtian didn't have a clue. Never mind. I'll just give it a try. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian utilized all his abilities. Second level wind concept, first level lightning concept, and earth force took turns to attack. But the illusory space was still stable like Mount Tai, and it wasn't affected in the slightest. Chapter 620. Thousand Illusions. A dim light flashed in the depths of Duan Lingtian's eyes as he hastily utilized his soul skill. Now, he was purely treating a dead horse as if it were still alive. He didn't have the slightest confidence in his ability to break through this illusory space with his soul skill Thousand Illusions. At this instant, Duan Lingtian constructed an illusory space and enveloped himself. In the next moment, the scene before Duan Lingtian's eyes changed, and a boundless grassland appeared, and it was covered in fresh and crisp grass. A light breeze that carried the fragrance of grass blew over, causing one to feel refreshed and relaxed. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian noticed that the ground beneath his feet suddenly shook, and it was as if the earth was quaking. Following which, under his gaze, the illusory space created by the soul skill, Thousand Illusions, shattered into pieces. Along with it, the dazzling palace shattered as well. It was also the fifth test of wisdom left behind by the martial monarch. Congratulations, you've passed the fifth test. So long as you defeat the mirror puppet and pass the sixth test, which is also the final test, you'll be able to directly obtain my inheritance and leave this place. The martial monarch's voice sounded out from all directions, and it clearly entered into Duan Lingtian's ears. I passed just like that. Duan Lingtian was stunned. Up until now, he was still slightly unable to recover from his shock. Earlier, when he utilized his soul skill Thousand Illusions, he didn't have the slightest confidence in being able to break through the illusory space left behind by the martial monarch. The outcome now was slightly unexpected to him. Mirror puppet. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian recovered from his shock, and he took a deep breath as slight fear appeared in his eyes. All along the way, he'd already experienced 2 tests of strength. The first test of strength was the 100 pure ghastly puppets that he'd single-handedly slaughtered. The second test of strength was the earth puppet that possessed abnormal offensive and defensive strength. If it wasn't for him comprehending lightning concept in time, he would probably be unable to pass that test. From his previous experiences, this test of strength would become more and more difficult as he progressed. Now, he would face the third test of strength, and it was also the final test. There's no doubt that this mirror puppet is stronger than the earth puppet. But I wonder how strong it is. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and mentally prepared himself. But at this moment, Duan Lingtian suddenly felt a fierce aura coming from ahead. When he raised his head and looked ahead, he was completely stunned. Heavens! What did he see? Now, in front of Duan Lingtian, a person appeared out of thin air. To be more precise, it was a young man in purple. What shocked Duan Lingtian was that this purple-clothed youth seemed to be carved from the same mold as him. Even the details were almost identical. Regardless of appearance or height, there was no difference. Most importantly, there was an extremely ugly sword in the violet-clothed young man's hand. This sword base was exactly the same as the grade 1 spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand. What's going on? Duan Lingtian was sure that there was absolutely nothing like a mirror before him. Moreover, his grade 1 spirit sword was currently lying within his spatial ring. His eyes. Duan Lingtian, who felt extreme shock, raised his head slightly and looked at the eyes of the violet-clothed young man that looked exactly like him. The violet-clothed young man's eyes were empty and lusterless, and his entire body was stiff as if he didn't have a soul. This is a mirror inscription formation. The memories of Samsara Emperor Wu flashed within Duan Lingtian's mind, and he quickly obtained an answer. The mirror inscription formation was an extremely profound and unfathomable inscription formation. Normally speaking, only an inscription master at the martial monarch stage or above was able to set it up. This type of inscription formation was extremely overbearing, and it was a great tool to trick others. No matter who it was, so long as one stepped into the mirror inscription formation, one would encounter a mirror puppet that looked exactly like him and possessed all his abilities. Besides not having a soul, being unable to execute soul skills, and being immune to soul skills. This mirror puppet is practically no different from me. No matter if it's my ability or my battle instinct. Duan Lingtian looked at the mirror puppet before him and couldn't help but gasp. The most terrifying thing is that this mirror puppet will instantly undergo a transformation along with me. For example, when I faced the earth puppet earlier, I was only able to destroy it after I hastily comprehended lightning concept. Whereas if I were to fight my mirror puppet and comprehend an even higher level of concept, its concept would transform along with it. This is an opponent with a strength that's exactly the same as mine. The most terrifying thing is that it doesn't have a soul or thoughts, and it doesn't know fear at all. In its world, there's only slaughter. Duan Lingtian's face was filled with fear. He knew that he would at most be able to fight an existence like this to a draw, and it was practically impossible for him to defeat the mirror puppet. If I could choose for myself, I would rather face 10 earth golems than my own mirror golem. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian felt a fierce aura assault his face from ahead. It was his mirror puppet that had made a move against him. Swoosh! The mirror puppet's figure flashed and directly executed the high-grade earth rank movement technique it was most familiar with, pursuing shadow, and it arrived before Qin Shi in the blink of an eye. Sword drawing arts. The same sword drawing arts was executed by the mirror puppet without the slightest bit of disharmony. A sword light that was like a bolt of lightning followed him like a shadow. It wasn't just that, the sword light even contained the second-level wind concept, first-level lightning concept, and elementary earth force that Duan Lingtian was familiar with. The icy coldness that assaulted his face caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but shiver. Whirlwind. Duan Lingtian hastily dodged, and the exceedingly swift sword light practically brushed past his face as it descended. An inconspicuous white mark appeared on his face. This dangerous scene caused Duan Lingtian to instantly return to his senses. Whoosh! An extremely ugly sword base appeared out of thin air in Duan Lingtian's hand, and it was precisely the grade 1 spirit sword he'd obtained in the first test. Presently, Duan Lingtian and the mirror puppet were like twins, and they were exactly the same from head to toe. The only difference was that the mirror puppet's eyes were empty and lusterless. Because the mirror puppet didn't have a soul. Swish! The mirror puppet attacked once more, and a tempest sword light that was coiled with wind concept and lightning concept shot out from the tip of the spirit sword in its hand, and it flashed towards Duan Lingtian like a sharp arrow that was shot out from a bow. It seemed as if it wanted to penetrate Duan Lingtian's body. Humph! Duan Lingtian grunted coldly and abruptly took a stride forward. Instantly, the spirit sword in his hand similarly pierced out in a perfectly straight manner, and a tempest sword light that was exactly the same whistled out to collide with the sword light shot out by the mirror puppet. Bang! The sword lights collided and then vanished, and a piercingly cold gale swept out, causing the violet clothes on Duan Lingtian and the mirror puppet to flutter with the wind. The Tempest sword light was a technique executed by Duan Lingtian by utilizing the Tempest point. It was executed casually and as if it was his own arm, and its might was extraordinary. But unfortunately, Duan Lingtian was in a head-on collision with the mirror puppet now, and they were evenly matched. Swoosh! 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 After a short moment, two extremely swift figures occasionally crisscrossed within the cavern, and they occasionally brought out a narrow and long sword light. It was Duan Lingtian and the mirror puppet that were in a fierce battle with their full strength. Between the two of them, their origin energy, concept, and combat experience were equal. Practically all their methods were exactly the same. Time silently flowed by. An hour had passed, yet Duan Lingtian and the mirror puppet were still unable to determine a victor, and they were always in a state of being evenly matched. Gradually, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but become slightly impatient. If this continues, when will it end? Duan Lingtian was agitated in his heart. This also caused his attacks to be affected by his mood, and he was slightly in a disadvantageous position in the following confrontation. Damn it! After he fell into a disadvantageous position, Duan Lingtian suffered the attacks of the mirror puppet that were like a storm, and the mirror puppet obviously wanted to defeat him in one go or even kill him. This fellow doesn't have a soul, so he utterly doesn't have an impatient mood like me. Most terrifying of all is that he has battle instincts that are almost similar to mine, and once he finds the slightest flaw of mine, he won't let it go. When faced with the attacks of the mirror puppet that were like a storm, Duan Lingtian retreated step by step in defeat, and he was in an extremely sorry state. The mirror puppet was like an emotionless and cold-blooded machine, and for the sake of attaining its goal, it exerted all its strength and was fearless. Could it be that my main body is going to lose to a mirror puppet? Duan Lingtian's expression was unsightly to the extreme. Only someone that was in the same situation as Duan Lingtian would be able to understand Duan Lingtian's current feelings. Just like the person that was in a fierce battle with his mirror puppet in the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure, the spacious cavern was covered in a layer of thick and solid ice. On this solid ice, two identical beautiful figures were ceaselessly crisscrossing each other. Suddenly, the two of them separated and stood in confrontation in midair. Ding! 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 Clear and melodious sounds ceaselessly sounded out from the things in their hands. When one looked carefully, it was an exquisite bell. The sound of the bell seemed to possess the ability to attract the soul, causing one to be unable to guard against it. The two young women that were in confrontation had identical appearances, and they were around the age of 15 or 16 with beautiful appearances. One could imagine that when they grew up, the two of them would surely be drop-dead gorgeous beauties. But one of the young women was slightly strange. She didn't have lively eyes like the other young woman, and she only had a pair of empty and lusterless eyes that seemed as if she didn't have a soul. How infuriating! The young woman that blinked with lively eyes panted with rage. Not only does this fellow possess a similar strength as me, he even possesses a similar weapon as me. Not to mention this, his ice concept is actually exactly similar to mine. Chapter 621. Duan Lingtian naturally didn't know what happened in the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure, nor did he have the interest to know. Presently, he was being suppressed by the mirror puppet. Since the mirror puppet had targeted his flaws when he was in an irritable mood, it attacked like a storm, catching him off guard and impossible to guard against. Swish! A swift black-colored sword light flashed out from the mirror puppet's hand, and it seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that descended onto the spirit sword that Duan Lingtian hastily raised up. Clang! Two grade 1 spirit swords that were exactly the same collided with each other and emitted an ear-piercing sound of metal colliding. At the same time, Duan Lingtian felt a violent energy come from the sword in the mirror puppet's hand, and it suppressed the strength that he hadn't completely mobilized in one go. Instantly, the violent energy on the mirror puppet's sword followed along the spirit sword in Duan Lingtian's hand and easily surged into Duan Lingtian's body. Even if Duan Lingtian executed the high-grade Earth-rank defensive martial skill, the Earth Dragon's barrier, it was useless. The defensive chi barrier formed by the Earth Dragon's barrier couldn't withstand a single blow before the violent energy of the mirror puppet, and it instantly shattered into pieces. The violent energy surged into Duan Lingtian's body and blasted Duan Lingtian flying. Duan Lingtian was like an arrow that left the bow, and he heavily collided with the distant cavern wall. Pooh! Duan Lingtian, who felt a sweetness rising from his throat, couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and his countenance was ghastly pale and in an extremely sorry state. The mirror puppet is like my shadow. Now, I've lost at the hands of my own shadow. If news of this were to spread, I wonder how many people would laugh at me. Duan Lingtian shook his head and laughed bitterly. I'll search through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu and see if there's any way to break this mirror puppet. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath and hurriedly fled when facing the mirror puppet that chased after him. At the same time, the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu flashed through his mind. There was no doubt that Samsara Emperor Wu was a powerful inscription master. In the memories of Reincarnation Emperor Wu, there was a method to set up the inscription formation to form the mirror puppet. There was also a lot of information about the mirror puppet. However, when Duan Lingtian carefully sorted out the information, he was shocked to find that this information was of no use to him at the moment. It was nothing more than bragging about how powerful the mirror puppet was. Once the mirror inscription formation was set up, no one would be able to escape the slaughter of the mirror puppets. If I was the person that set up the inscription formation, then I would naturally be happy to see someone being killed by his own mirror puppet. But the problem is that I'm the one being bullied by my own mirror puppet now. As Duan Lingtian fled, his mood became more and more irritable. Could it be that there's really no way? Duan Lingtian continued to search through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu that were related to the mirror puppet. Unfortunately, after half a day, Duan Lingtian still didn't have any clues. Time quietly passed. As for Duan Lingtian, he was still being chased by the mirror puppet and was in a more and more sorry state. At the moment, Duan Lingtian was still constantly searching through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. As the saying goes, the heavens reward those who persevere. These words were not wrong at all. After a day and a night, Duan Lingtian finally saw a blurry memory in Samsara Emperor Wu's lifetime memories. This blurry memory was precisely the flaw of the mirror puppet. The most terrifying thing about the mirror puppet is that it has no soul, no feelings, and doesn't know exhaustion. There's another terrifying thing. That is, no matter what the original body comprehends, no matter what new changes there are, it will follow and learn. The blurry memory gradually became clear. And this characteristic is not only its strength, but also its greatest weakness. If the original body deliberately self-mutilates by going berserk, the mirror puppet will generally self-mutilate as well. The original body can stop in time, but the mirror puppet won't think so much. It's one-track minded and will only continue to charge headlong, not giving up until it reaches the Yellow River. This memory caused Duan Lingtian's eyes to brighten. So it's that simple, to think that I was played by this guy for half a day. In my opinion, this test is not only a test of strength, but also a test of wisdom. Accurately speaking, it's a test of the combination of strength and wisdom. Duan Lingtian dodged the mirror puppet's sword once again, and his heart moved. In an instant, the origin energy in his body started to surge. When Duan Lingtian's sharp spiritual force extended to the mirror puppet's body, he discovered that the origin energy in its body was also surging, and the situation was almost identical to the situation in his body. Then let's play a big one. Duan Lingtian's heart shook, and his eyes revealed a trace of madness. Subsequently, the origin energy in his body instantly flowed in reverse, and charged towards the path it came from. Along the way, it destroyed many meridians. At this moment, Duan Lingtian only felt unbearable pain. Fortunately, these injuries were all within the scope of his control. As long as he returned and swallowed the Great Recovery Pill, he would be completely healed. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force could discover that the mirror puppet's origin energy was similarly destroying its own body. Bang! The origin energy in Duan Lingtian's body rushed out, destroying all the meridians along the way. The mirror image puppet followed suit. It's about time. Duan Lingtian's heart moved, and he stopped the rhythm of his origin energy. But the mirror puppet didn't know how to stop, and it still continued to destroy its own body there. Taking out a Great Recovery Pill and consuming it, Duan Lingtian's gaze was slightly cold as he faced the mirror puppet that was swaying. Sword drawing arts. An incomparably swift sword strike whistled out. Facing the mirror puppet that raised its hands slowly and suffered from internal injuries, Duan Lingtian seemed to have transformed into a fierce tiger, and he instantly bit off the mirror puppet's neck. A deep sword mark was left on the mirror puppet's throat, but it didn't bleed. Bang! Right at this moment, the mirror puppet stopped moving, its body trembled, and it instantly exploded into nothingness. The inscription formation had been broken. Congratulations, you've passed the 6th test. As the first person to pass all the tests, you'll obtain my lifetime inheritance. Walk through the open stone door in front, and you'll be able to arrive at the place where I struggled at death's door. The martial monarch's voice sounded out once more, and it was extremely clear when it entered Duan Lingtian's ears. I passed. Duan Lingtian smiled, and he felt indescribably excited in his heart. Right at this moment. Rumble. Rumble. Duan Lingtian saw the cave wall in front of him suddenly tremble. Ferocious cracks appeared on it, and they combined together to form a spider web. Soon after, the cave wall collapsed, and a huge stone door appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. Currently, the stone door was rising up. Bang! A loud sound reverberated in the air, and the stone door completely rose up. A passageway was revealed behind the stone door. The passageway could not be considered long, and Duan Lingtian could see the light on the other side as he stood on the spot. The martial monarch's inheritance. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath. At this moment, he could almost hear the sound of his own heartbeat. Without any hesitation, Duan Lingtian directly rushed toward the passageway in front of him. Although he possessed the lifetime memories of the reincarnation Emperor Wu, he was not the reincarnation Emperor Wu after all. To the current him, the martial monarch's inheritance was an unreachable existence. Now, this unreachable existence was easily within his reach. Naturally, he was excited. After passing through the passageway, another extremely spacious cave appeared before Duan Lingtian's eyes. The cave was very big, but it was empty. In the distance, there was a stone platform, and a person was sitting cross-legged on it. To be more precise, it was a complete skeleton. The skeleton was wearing white clothes, and the white clothes were made of an unknown material. After a long time, it was still intact, which was shocking. Duan Lingtian stepped forward and slowly walked to the front of the skeleton, sizing it up. The skeleton was extremely sturdy, and it seemed to be a strong man in the past. At this moment, the skeleton's right hand was stretched out, and it was tightly holding a sword that stood upright on the ground. It was a simple and unadorned sword. This sword, Duan Lingtian's eyes could not help but light up. He could see that this sword was much more powerful than the sword embryo in his hand. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian saw a word engraved on the sword hilt, and he was completely stunned. Wave. That was clearly the word, wave. It can't be so coincidental, right? Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, took a step forward, and raised his hand to touch the sword in the skeleton's hand. For a moment, Duan Lingtian only felt that the sword was cold to the touch. As his spiritual energy extended and merged into it, he confirmed something. This is a quasi-royal grade spirit sword. Duan Lingtian confirmed it completely. Not only that, this spirit sword should have been personally refined by the reincarnation Emperor Wu in the past. Duan Lingtian, who had merged with the reincarnation Emperor Wu's memories, knew some of the reincarnation Emperor Wu's habits in the past in detail. In the second lifetime of the reincarnation Emperor Wu, he studied the Tao of weapon refinement to the extreme. Later on, as long as he refined quasi-royal grade spirit weapons and royal grade spirit weapons, he would engrave the word wave on them. The reason this word was engraved was because in the second lifetime of the reincarnation Emperor Wu, his name was Gu Lang. Gu Lang was the name of the reincarnation Emperor Wu in his second lifetime, and it accompanied him throughout his life. Of course, when the reincarnation Emperor Wu once again stood at the peak of Cloud Continent in his second lifetime, besides a few friends by his side, very few people knew his true name. Everyone uniformly addressed him as the reincarnation Emperor Wu. The reincarnation Emperor Wu was a legend on Cloud Continent at that time, an undefeated legend. According to the reincarnation Emperor Wu's memories, he didn't refine many quasi-royal grade spirit weapons and royal grade spirit weapons in his lifetime, and he gave them all to his good friends or loved ones by his side. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the skeleton before him. Could it be that this person has some sort of relationship with the reincarnation Emperor Wu? When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian couldn't help but shake his head and laugh in self-ridicule. What am I thinking? When the reincarnation Emperor Wu reincarnated in his second lifetime, it was an entire 10,000 years from now. No matter how strong the Emperor Wu was, I'm afraid he would have already transformed into a pile of dirt. Chapter 622. Shaking his head, Duan Lingtian withdrew his thoughts that had drifted to God knows where and returned to his senses. Looks like this skeleton is that sword cultivator martial monarch that left behind the sword monarch's treasure. I wonder what the inheritance he spoke of is. Duan Lingtian sized up the white-clothed skeleton before him, and then he looked around, yet he didn't notice anything. There was no spatial ring on the fingers of the white-clothed skeleton as well. Where's his spatial ring? Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he was filled with interest towards the spatial ring of the martial monarch before him. There were surely many good things within the spatial ring of the martial monarch. But along with Duan Lingtian searching around the spacious cavern, he didn't notice the spatial ring left behind by the martial monarch. Instantly, Duan Lingtian was slightly discouraged. This fellow wouldn't be making fun of me, right? Duan Lingtian shook his head and returned to the side of the martial monarch's skeleton. Perhaps it's on him. Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand without the slightest restraint and pulled open the white clothes on the martial monarch's skeleton. Even though he didn't find a spatial ring within, he found a jade slip. This jade slip flickered with a faint jade green sheen, and it looked to be of much higher quality than the voice transmission jade slip. After searching through the memories of Emperor Wu for a while, Duan Lingtian recognized what it was. Memory jade slip. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath. A memory jade slip was a jade slip that could record the specific information of inscription formations, cultivation methods, martial skills, and so on and so forth. Ordinary cultivation methods and martial skills were all recorded in a small booklet. But many high-grade cultivation methods and martial skills were directly recorded in memory jade slips. There were even many inscription masters that left behind their comprehensions towards the art of inscription on the memory jade slip before they passed away for their descendants. Of course, not every inscription master was able to do this. The preciousness of a memory jade slip was utterly not something a voice transmission jade slip could compare to. Just as he held the memory jade slip in his hand, Duan Lingtian heard the martial emperor's voice again. No matter who you are, since you're able to come here and obtain this memory jade slip, then you can be considered to have obtained my inheritance. I don't need you to acknowledge me as your master, as long as you don't let down what I've learned, that's enough. After all this nonsense, I still haven't formally introduced myself. I've been an orphan since I was young. I have no parents, and I've spent half my life in poverty. I've only been able to become a martial monarch because of repeated fortuitous encounters. My acquaintances all call me white-clothed. Most people call me Tempest Sword Monarch or White-Clothed Sword Monarch. In this life of mine, due to my worship of that reincarnation Emperor Wu, who suddenly disappeared a few thousand years ago, I have touched upon the Tao of weapon refinement and the Tao of inscriptions. Of course, I am far inferior to Senior Reincarnation Emperor Wu. Within this memory jade slip are the methods to set up and utilize inscription formations that I'm most skilled in. Besides that, there's also the sword skill I cultivate, the Nine Tribulation Sword Control Technique. After you obtain this jade slip, you can take the 3 profundity fragments within my skull. I hope they'll be able to assist you to become a martial monarch in the future. Besides that, you can take the spirit sword in my hand as well. This spirit sword is a quasi-royal grade spirit weapon that's almost extinct in Cloud Continent, and it's rare in the world. Before you possess the strength to protect it, try not to reveal it before others. An ordinary man is innocent, but a treasure is a crime. Now that I speak of it, the thing I love the most in my entire life is this royal grade spirit sword. Because it's the work of Senior Reincarnation Emperor Wu that I worship the most. Before Senior Reincarnation Emperor Wu, there were no spirit weapons above the quasi-royal grade in Cloud Continent. After Senior Reincarnation Emperor Wu, I'm afraid it's difficult for another spirit weapon above the quasi-royal grade to appear. So, you have to take good care of this sword. The message recorded by the voice transmission inscription on the memory jade slip stopped abruptly. I never imagined that this white-clothed sword monarch is an admirer of Reincarnation Emperor Wu. But, I believe him when he says there were no spirit weapons above the quasi-royal grade before Reincarnation Emperor Wu. But after Reincarnation Emperor Wu, it might not be difficult for a spirit weapon above the quasi-royal grade to appear. As he finished muttering to himself, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a wisp of a smile. So long as his cultivation stepped into the martial monarch stage, he would be able to condense a quasi-royal grade weapon flame and refine a quasi-royal grade spirit weapon from there. Not to mention a quasi-royal grade spirit weapon. If I'm able to become Emperor Wu, then even a royal grade spirit weapon would be at my fingertips. Duan Lingtian had a confident expression. He'd completely inherited the lifetime worth of memories of Reincarnation Emperor Wu, and it included Reincarnation Emperor Wu's weapon refinement experience and weapon refinement methods. So long as one's cultivation was sufficient, so long as one possessed sufficient materials, refining a high-grade spirit weapon wasn't a problem at all. According to what this white-clothed sword monarch said, he's actually a figure from a few thousand years ago. Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed as he thought in his heart. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian's attention returned to the memory jade slip in his hand. Along with Duan Lingtian's spiritual force coming into contact with the memory jade slip, vast amounts of information directly gushed into Duan Lingtian's mind. Fortunately, Duan Lingtian was prepared, otherwise, Duan Lingtian would have probably been shaken to the point of fainting. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian had sorted out all this information. Inscription formation. Isn't this the inscription formation that can cause the 9 swords to combine into one? Even Reincarnation Emperor Wu didn't have the fortune to touch upon this inscription formation all those years ago. I never imagined that the white-clothed sword monarch would actually know how to set it up. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be surprised as he sorted out this memory. Besides this inscription formation, Duan Lingtian didn't care about the other inscription formations. Those inscription formations were all within the memories of Reincarnation Emperor Wu. The only exception was the split unite inscription pattern formation. The split unite inscription formation was the key to the sword monarch's treasure, and the inscription formation contained within the jade sword. It was precisely because of the existence of this inscription formation that the jade sword was able to be divided into 9 swords, and the 9 swords could combine into one. There's also this sword skill. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian moved his attention to the sword skill left behind by the white-clothed sword monarch. This sword skill was actually a heaven-rank sword skill. It stressed upon dividing a spirit sword into 9 and controlling the 9 spirit swords to fight the enemy. This sword skill needs to be combined with the split unite inscription formation. But, the white-clothed sword monarch inscribed the split unite inscription formation on his weapon, the quasi-royal grade spirit sword. Duan Lingtian returned to his senses, and his gaze descended onto the spirit sword in the hand of the white-clothed sword monarch. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian lightly took the spirit sword in his hand. Relying on the delight left behind by the white-clothed sword monarch, Duan Lingtian was extremely casual and easy in controlling the split unite inscription formation. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's hand shook as his origin energy fused into the quasi-royal grade spirit sword. In the next moment, the quasi-royal grade spirit sword flashed with a strong light and transformed into 9 swords. This 9 tribulation sword control technique is interesting. It actually needs to be combined with the sword control technique. But, this sword control technique requires the combination of spiritual force to execute. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he copied the sword control technique, and with a raise of his hand, he tossed the 9 quasi-royal grade spirit swords into the air. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force swept out to envelop the 9 quasi-royal grade spirit swords, and he intended to control these spirit swords to float in the air. But unfortunately, with Duan Lingtian's current spiritual force, he was only barely able to make one spirit sword float in the air. Moreover, it was even swaying and might fall at any moment. As for the other spirit swords, they directly fell to the ground and emitted a wave of clamorous sounds. This 9 tribulation sword control technique is slightly interesting. When 9 swords are executed in unison, even though it's unable to overlap their strength, the 9 swords attack from all directions, and it's impossible to guard against. Duan Lingtian had fused with the lifetime worth of memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, so his discerning gaze was unique and realized that the 9 tribulation sword control technique wasn't simple. To a certain extent, this 9 tribulation sword control technique was not inferior to the best heaven-rank high-grade martial skill in Samsara Emperor Wu's memory, the 9 Dragons Radiant Flash. The 9 Dragons Radiant Flash was a heaven-rank high-grade martial skill that came with the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique that Duan Lingtian cultivated. After cultivating this cultivation technique to the 7th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, one could begin to cultivate it, and its might was extremely terrifying. With my current strength, no matter if it's the 9 Tribulation Sword control technique or the 9 Dragons Radiant Flash, it's difficult for me to cultivate them. I'll think about this in the future. Soon after, Duan Lingtian returned to his senses, and his gaze once again descended onto the 9 quasi-royal grade spirit swords. His spiritual force extended out and touched the inscription formation in one of the quasi-royal grade spirit swords. Instantly, the 9 quasi-royal grade spirit swords merged into one again. Unfortunately, after this quasi-royal grade spirit sword is divided into 9, it can't attack by itself. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to having 9 quasi-royal grade spirit swords in my hands. Duan Lingtian was slightly disappointed about this. But he knew as well that it was impossible for such an abnormal thing to appear in this world. An inscription formation was able to allow a quasi-royal grade spirit sword to be divided into 9, and it could even be used by itself. Then wouldn't this inscription formation be heaven-defying? If such an inscription formation really existed, then even the heavens wouldn't tolerate it. After the spirit sword is divided into 9, it can only be jointly used by a single person. Coupled with the 9 tribulation sword control technique, the 9 swords would sweep out from all directions, and any one of the swords would possess the amplification strength of a quasi-royal grade spirit sword. When he thought about how he would have the opportunity to utilize the Nine Tribulation sword control technique in the future by relying on the quasi-royal grade spirit sword that was divided into 9, Duan Lingtian was slightly excited in his heart. Gradually, Duan Lingtian's mood calmed down. His gaze descended onto the white-clothed skeleton before him. He still remembered the white-clothed sword monarch's message. In the message, he asked him to take out 3 profundity fragments from the skeleton. 3 profundity fragments. Earlier, the white-clothed sword monarch's message seemed to have mentioned that someone called him the Tempest Sword Monarch. Wind, lightning, sword. Could it be that the 3 types of profundity fragments within his skull are the wind profundity fragment, lightning profundity fragment, and sword profundity fragment? When he thought up to here, Duan Lingtian's mood that had just calmed down surged once again. In the next moment, Duan Lingtian stretched out his hand while practically trembling, and he stretched it into the white-clothed sword monarch's skull to touch the 3 profundity fragments, ah. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian felt a fierce aura sweep towards his hand, and it cut open his hand. Chapter 623. After using his origin energy to stop the wound, Duan Lingtian, who'd learned his lesson, hurriedly coiled his origin energy around his hand and once again felt his way in. This time, he withdrew 3 fragments at once. These 3 fragments were slightly similar to concept fragments in appearance, but the surface of their bodies had strands of material aura that was like flames. One of the fragments was completely jade green in color, and its surroundings seemed to flicker with jade green flames. Wind profundity fragment. With just a glance, Duan Lingtian, who'd merged with the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, recognized this profundity fragment. The other fragment was completely dark violet in color, and its surroundings flickered with violet flames. Lightning could be faintly seen within the flames. Lightning profundity fragment. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he realized his guess from before was correct. The last fragment was completely translucent and emitted a fierce sword chi. It was precisely the sword profundity fragment. These 3 profundity fragments are actually all 3rd level profundity fragments. Looks like the white-clothed sword monarch was an extraordinary figure when he was alive. Duan Lingtian guessed in his heart. 3 types of profundities had all been comprehended to the 3rd level. Such comprehension ability could be considered to be outstanding even amongst the numerous martial monarchs. My gains aren't bad. Duan Lingtian put away the 3 profundity fragments into his spatial ring, and a brilliant smile appeared on his face. But in next to no time, he restrained his expression. I wonder how Xuanai, Little Black, Little White, and Little Gold are now. Didn't the white-clothed sword monarch say that I can leave after obtaining the inheritance? Where do I leave from? Duan Lingtian looked around. In the end, he noticed a secret on the cavern wall at the side. On the right cavern wall, a protruding small rock had suddenly appeared since an unknown time. Duan Lingtian didn't notice it earlier. Duan Lingtian walked over and patted the small rock, and he noticed it could move. Instantly, Duan Lingtian pressed the small rock down. In the next moment. Rumble. Rumble. The cavern wall beside the small rock suddenly trembled, and in the next moment, it directly split open and collapsed. Then, a stone door appeared and slowly rose. A moment later, another pitch-black tunnel appeared in front of Duan Lingtian. This should be the exit. Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up and he walked straight in. In his hand, a purple flame with copper edges appeared out of thin air. It was the artifact flame that he used for illumination. If there was anyone who recognized this weapon flame, they would definitely be so angry that they would vomit blood. Using a purplish copper-edged 3rd-grade artifact fire to light up the room was simply a waste of natural resources. However, Duan Lingtian did not care about this. Not long after, Duan Lingtian reached the end of the tunnel. At the end of the passageway was a closed stone door. Dong! Dong! Duan Lingtian knocked on the stone door. He found that the stone door was made of a special material. Even if a martial artist at the Profound Void martial stage or the Void Transformation martial stage wanted to break it with brute force, it would be impossible. There should be a mechanism here. Thinking of this, Duan Lingtian began to look around. In the end, Duan Lingtian found a small protruding stone on the wall beside the stone door. I wonder where the stone door leads to. Duan Lingtian thought as he pressed his hand on the small stone. In an instant. Rumble. Rumble. At this moment, Duan Lingtian found that not only was the stone door in front of him rising, but there was also a loud noise coming from the end of the tunnel behind him. This mechanism not only opened this stone door, but also closed the stone door at the other end. Duan Lingtian was stunned. At this moment, Duan Lingtian found that the stone door in front of him had been opened. The ground outside the stone door was also covered with a layer of gravel. Duan Lingtian stepped out. He found that the stone door he walked out of was also covered by a thick layer of cave wall. When the stone door opened, the cave wall outside was shattered. Brother Lingtian. Right at this moment, a familiar voice sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears. Duan Lingtian looked over when he heard this voice, and only now did he notice a robust middle-aged man walking over from afar, and the middle-aged man arrived before him in a short moment. Dong Ming. Duan Lingtian recognized this person, and it was precisely the possessor of the first jade sword that he'd contacted with the jade sword that day, Dong Ming. Bang! Right at this moment, another loud bang sounded out. Only now did Duan Lingtian notice that the stone door at the entrance of the tunnel he'd just walked out of had actually closed once more. Dong Ming was shocked, and then he looked at Duan Lingtian and said with an envious expression, "Brother Lingtian, I really envy you, you were actually able to enter the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure." "You didn't enter?" Duan Lingtian was stunned and couldn't help but ask. Dong Ming laughed bitterly. "When I arrived at the end of the second level, there were people that had entered all 10 stairs. Only 10 people were able to enter the third level, and because I was already too late when I arrived, I missed it." Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding, and only now did he recall that there seemed to be such a thing. Duan Lingtian sized up the surroundings, and only now did he notice that this was the first level of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Not far ahead of him, balls of gray and hazy mist were condensed high up in the sky. That place was the entrance to the Sword Monarch's treasure that was located at the depths of the sea. The entrance to the Sword Monarch's treasure was there. Where are the others? Duan Lingtian looked around the surroundings and only noticed Dong Ming, and he couldn't help but ask curiously. "There are another 6 people like me that were unable to enter the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure. At this moment, they're probably still at the second level," Dong Ming said. This time, there were 7 people that weren't fated to enter the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Duan Lingtian, Han Xuanai, the little gold mouse, and the 2 little pythons occupied a total of 5 spots in the third level of the Sword Monarch's treasure. Besides that, only 5 spots remained, and when divided amongst 12 people, there were naturally 7 people that didn't obtain anything. "Why didn't you stay at the second level?" Duan Lingtian asked curiously. "In any case, I've already missed the third level, so there's no use in staying at the second level." "So I returned to the first level. But since Elder Hu has entered the third level, I didn't come here in vain this time." As he finished speaking, Dong Ming was slightly excited. "He entered the third level, what are you so excited about?" Duan Lingtian's face froze. Dong Ming said with a smile, "Brother Lingtian, there's something you don't know. Before I came here, I discussed it with Elder Hu, and no matter what we obtained, we'll split it equally between the 2 of us." "What you mean is, we have to split half of the treasures he obtained with you?" Duan Lingtian asked. "Yes." Dong Ming nodded. Duan Lingtian frowned. Ask that elder Hu to split half of the treasures with Dongming. Would he be so kind? He didn't hold any hope. Why haven't Xuanai and the others come out yet? Duan Lingtian chatted idly with Dongming for a while when he noticed Xuanai, the little gold mouse, and the two little pythons hadn't appeared, and he couldn't help but frown as a wisp of worry appeared on his face. Brother Lingtian, is the third level very dangerous? Dongming's heart jerked when he saw the worry on Duan Lingtian's face. It's not just dangerous, it's simply life-threatening. When he heard Dongming, Duan Lingtian recalled the scenes he'd encountered on the third level, and for a time, he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in his heart. Dongming's expression went slightly grim when he heard this, and he said with slight worry, I wonder how Elder Hu is now. If Elder Hu died on the third level, then he would have really come here in vain this time. Brother Lingtian has returned. Suddenly, a surprised voice sounded out from afar. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian saw 6 people heading straight towards him. Amongst these 6 people, 3 of them had once received kindness from him. On the way here, because the cultivations of these 3 people were comparatively low, it was difficult for the origin energy barriers they held up on the surface of their bodies to resist the pressure of the seawater at the bottom of the sea, and it was he who asked these people to take refuge on the back of the 3-eyed flame tiger. The cultivations of these 3 people were all 4th level void initiation stage martial artists. Presently, the 3 of them looked at Duan Lingtian with slight warmth. On the other hand, when the other 3 people looked at Duan Lingtian, traces of a greedy sheen was mixed within the depths of their eyes. Although it was concealed very deeply, Duan Lingtian still noticed it clearly. The cultivations of these 3 people were all 5th level void initiation stage martial artists. Presumably, it was precisely because their cultivations were limited that they weren't able to arrive at the end of the 2nd level in time and missed the quota to enter the 3rd level. Brother Lingtian, did you gain anything on the 3rd level? One of the 3 people that were warm asked curiously. Not bad. Duan Lingtian nodded with a light smile. Congratulations, Brother Lingtian. The other 2 people congratulated Duan Lingtian repeatedly. But in next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that the expressions of these 3 people froze, as if they'd suddenly thought of something. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian noticed that a sheen of conflict flickered in the depths of their eyes. In the end, the sheen of conflict vanished and was replaced by greed. The smile on Duan Lingtian's face didn't change, yet there was slight coldness in the depths of his gaze. According to his guess, these 3 people that were originally very warm to him ought to have received the voice transmissions of the other 3 people now, and they'd come to some sort of agreement. The facts proved that Duan Lingtian had completely guessed the intentions of the other 3 people. In the blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian was surrounded by 6 people. What are all of you doing? The scene before him caused Dongming's face to go grim as he asked with a shout. Dongming, this matter isn't related to you. You better stay at the side. Otherwise, we'll kill you as well. One of the 5th level void initiation stage martial artists glanced coldly and indifferently at Dongming as he threatened. This person was precisely one of the 3 5th level void initiation stage martial artists that first aroused greed towards Duan Lingtian. Dongming, I advise you to mind your own business. You're only at the 5th level of the void initiation stage. We have 3 5th level void initiation stage martial artists here, and any 2 of them would be sufficient to annihilate you. Another person spoke out as well. Dongming's face sank, as he naturally knew that what these 2 people said was true. If he helped Duan Lingtian, then he would probably be unable to escape death. Don't forget young Miss Xuanai by Brother Lingtian's side. If you dare touch him, then young Miss Xuanai will absolutely not let you off. Dongming took a deep breath and carried out Han Xuanai. As soon as Dongming finished speaking, the expressions of the 3 people that were instigated to go against Duan Lingtian went grim. But in next to no time, they gritted their teeth and became firm. Riches and honor were sought amidst danger, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.